Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to the 2022 PCW, first PCW in person in 3 years. Wonderful to have everybody here. This is Fed, you have made it. Welcome. Everyone has had travel adventures over the last 24 hours, I imagine. Some more interesting than others, but it's great to have everybody here. This is sort of a pre-meeting. The main meeting will start later today, and I imagine there's going to be introductory grand remarks at the plenary session and so on. But so this is the Science Advisory Committee. My name is Michael Strauss from Princeton University. I chair the Science Advisory Committee, and this is an open meeting to which all are welcome. We have 4 members of the Science Advisory Committee here in person, so let's start with some introductions. Again, Michael Strauss, I chair. Actually, before we go on, because people are about to do so, those people are sitting at the tables. Will notice that they have little microphones with red buttons, means that you're muted. Push the little switch at the bottom to switch to green if you want to introduce yourself. So indeed, David, can you introduce yourself as a member of the Science Advisory Committee? Button is at the base of the thing. Right there. Here.
Hello, this is David Kirkby from UC Irvine, and also a member of the Dark Energy Science Collaboration.
Okay. Will?
Hello everyone, this is Will Clarkson, University of Michigan, Dearborn. I've recently been elected the Science Collaborations Coordinator with the impossible task of succeeding Fed Bianco in this role.
Okay, and Franz?
Franz Bauer here from Universidad Católica in Chile.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have a number of SAC members on Blue Jeans. Because of, again, the vagaries of travel, we have most of the SAC is on Blue Jeans. And again, David, if you can sort of, you're keeping an eye on who's there, if you can just ask people to introduce themselves.
Okay, so I see Will Brandt is online, I think.
Neil Brandt.
Hi. Neil Brandt, Penn State University.
Okay.
Charles.
Hi, Charles Liu at the City University of New York.
Josh is online.
Yeah, Josh Simon from Carnegie Observatories.
Nancy.
Nancy?
Hi, this is Nancy Gastiberg from Caltech.
Meg.
Meg Schwam from Queen's University, Belfast.
Okay, did I miss anyone online?
I think you said Stephen Smart was on?
I saw him before.
Okay.
Hi, Risa Wexler is here from Stanford and Slack.
Hi, Risa. Wonderful. Okay,
Rachel
so
from Cornell as well.
Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, Stephen's on as well.
I'm here too. Marshall Catlin from Catholic University, Chile.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's everyone.
Okay, so we have, so we're sort of a split personality.
Did Rachel get recognized? I'm part, sorry.
Sorry, I think I got caught in the audio mix-up. Yeah, Rachel
Please.
Bean from Cornell.
Welcome, Rachel. Okay, sorry for this confusion. I suspect we'll be doing a little bit of this as we do this hybrid meeting. We're all supposed to be good at hybrid meetings now, but we'll move forward. So we have a rather full agenda. Actually, before we get into that, let me just click through, and I just have a few slides. I think these are slides that we'll see over and over again throughout the meeting. General instructions about the fact that this meeting is under a code of conduct as described here, and remembering that the COVID protocols, I see everyone is masked, and handshake or fist bump as is comfortable with people. So for the meeting itself, again, I think all the sessions or many of the sessions will be hybrid like this one. The SAC meeting, we have a variety of presentations, but many of them are sort of more discussion-based and sort of encourage those people, so certainly the SAC members, to feel comfortable to just jump in at any time with questions. For everybody in the broader audience, I think we'll for the most part leave questions and sort of wait for a sort of a lull in the discussion, and if you want to ask questions, we have a variety of ways for those who are remote to ask questions. Again, SAC members should just feel free to blurt your questions out, as it were. But you can also raise your hands in Blue Jeans. You can use the Blue Jeans chat, and we have a Slack channel. I was just informed that we have 2 different Slack channels for this. David, you were just mentioning this to me. I don't know.
Yeah, we have 2, but I sent a message in the one that had fewer people subscribe, pointing them to the one with more people subscribe.
Okay. So
I will try and monitor both, but that'll make my life harder.
Okay. So let me just ask for those SAC members who are remote. Again, let me strongly encourage you not to be shy and jump in at any time with questions. If it gets too chaotic, we may have to sort of enforce the hand-raising thing, but I think I'm hoping that we can move forward that way. Again, if you're sitting at one of the tables and want to speak, you have to unmute yourself. If you're in the back and want to speak, I think we'll use the passed mic. Otherwise, the folks who are remote are not going to be able to hear you. Or if whoever is speaking, whoever is presenting, can repeat questions as appropriate.
Michael, question for you.
Yes, please.
Do you want us to ask questions after the end of a presentation, or in the middle? What's recommended, just so that we're all?
I think I want to keep this discussion based. I think each of the people presenting have a slightly different idea of exactly what they want to do, but my own tendency is to make it more of a conversation than formal presentation. So do ask in the middle if it seems appropriate. So here's the list of SAC members. I think we have almost everybody is here in person or virtually, as we just discussed. And here's the agenda. I'm not going to read this through, but what you'll see is a whole series of different items of things that the SAC has been involved in thinking about or otherwise, and many of these themes will come up again later in this meeting in various contexts. But this is an opportunity for the SAC to give their opinions and to ask perhaps some specific pointed questions. You'll see we're going until 10:30. I understand we'll aim for a break at that point. We'll try to respect that. I'm told that there will be coffee at that point. I'm looking at Ranpal. The folks in the other room did say that coffee would be available at that point. But you see, we're going all the way until 12:30, and then the SAC themselves will grab lunch and then find a place to sit to discuss in closed session. But up until then, we'll be in open session throughout. And I think that's it for the moment. I think we can go on, and I think Ranpal, you are the first presentation talking about communications, which is one of the themes that the SAC has had fun with. Do you want this?
Can the remote viewer see? Yep. All good. Okay. Good morning and welcome, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ranpal Gill, and I'm head of communications for the construction project. I'm going to talk to you about the communications survey results. We carried out a survey earlier this year. The reason for that survey was last year at the Project and Community Workshop, the Science Advisory Committee charged the communications team with carrying out a survey to find out how we're doing with communications and on the various tools that we use. I'll start by not talking about the communications question, but we tried to capture the audience demographic of the respondents to our survey. And a third of them identified as being underrepresented within the gender, being underrepresented. Of that 30%, 70% of them identified as being underrepresented within the gender spectrum. That included intersectionality with race, with disability, sexual orientation, and other such sectionality characteristics. And about 22% identified as being underrepresented with race. And there's other areas that were not fully explained. Moving on to the actual questions that were asked in the survey. The first one was about the channels that people get their information from. Now, Slack is the leader here, and that's come in from nowhere. That was not on the previous survey that we did in 2017. So it's really clear that that's come in from nowhere, from behind, to be the leader for where people go to get their information. And the science collaboration emails, that used to be the #1 position before in 2017 when we carried out this survey. So the other channels that seemed to be quite important were professional meetings and also the digest. Now, the community forum is an area that's had more and more effort recently, and I think that we're not seeing the results of that quite yet, but hopefully next time we do a survey, we might see an increased use on that. And the website as well, it doesn't seem to quite have the usage that we would expect. Part of that is because this survey was for the community and for staff, and the website is quite public focused. We're going to have a deeper discussion in the next 15-minute slot about the website. So we also asked about social media. In general, we've seen an increase in engagement across social media. We could see that with the results that came in. The three that have a marked increase are Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. As for YouTube, the community engagement team in operations has been uploading a lot of their videos and informational videos there. And so I think that we've driven more traffic, and so we've got more engagement within YouTube. As for LinkedIn, the communications team has made efforts to increase engagement there as well. So other channels. So this was an open text question, and so I had to put the information into various buckets. But what we see here is that because Slack was already asked about in the previous question, that did not come up here. And so email really is the next most popular channel. And we'll see that email and Slack are really the top two across our community for usage. Raising issues with the Rubin organization. Again, Slack is the most used one of all of those, and then email as well.
Sorry if I can interrupt with a question. How many people actually filled out this question?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was somewhere in the region of 90.
90.
Yes.
Were you happy with that turnout, or?
We're never happy with the turnout. We'd always like more people to answer the surveys. But yeah.
I guess another way to ask the question is, what biases might you be worried about in the results here?
Well, the one that it is just community and it is just staff, so we don't know quite what the balance is between those two.
Yeah, right.
That was my question. What was the balance between staff and community? Do you have that?
That question was not a mandatory question, so we don't really know for sure.
I mean, I guess 90 out of how many do you expect, right? So just, how many are coming to the PCW? How many are actually in the community, right? Is this?
It's a very small number that responded to the survey.
Yeah. So I would worry a little bit about taking much away from that.
Yeah. I mean, you could look at it in two ways. Sometimes the people that answer are the people that have complaints. Or you could, typically that's usually
more engaged or something.
And so, just with that, we can take away what we need to improve on at least. Okay, I think I covered this one.
So can I raise a question about that slide you just moved away from?
Yep.
So there's been a push to move to community.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice it's not in the top 3. And so I do wonder, that is a concern, that people are raising things to Rubin members, right, staff members, through Slack. And therefore there's no record of it, right? Or again, how do you redistribute? Because people are are overloaded, right? And so something that really should go to the community engagement team might be answered by, somebody else on the team that really shouldn't be answering it. It should go through other protocols. And so to me, the fact that it's 64% comes from raising issues or sharing ideas to the Rubin organizations coming through Slack is problematic, because it means finding those things later isn't recorded, nor is it being recorded, right, in an easy way for this to track how much, what the community engagement team needs to be doing or what they are doing, right, because it's all on Slack. Where if you had, right, if it was on community or help desk, you can track and be like 80% of our issues are X, right, documentation. So I'm just wondering if that's something you took away from this, right? Because that immediately, the fact that it's emailing someone directly and the fact that Slack, to me, are maybe not where we want to be going in the long term to push towards an observatory model, right?
Right. I'll let Melissa answer that in a bit, but I think that, we are still in construction mainly, and so in development, and the push is to go towards community, and we are still trying to do that. Slack's been around, I guess, has been marketed more than the community forum has, but there definitely moves to try to go that way. I guess, do you have anything to add, Melissa? We have to just keep trying, right?
I mean, I guess I could add that I'm not super concerned yet with like the number of people who are reporting that they're still using Slack or emailing a team member, partially because a lot of our most engaged community members they're in desk, they're working really closely with developers, they're in the Slack, and those kinds of interactions will continue to sort of happen in the Slack, and that's not like unexpected, that kind of engagement and that kind of development work. So I'm not worried about it yet, is what I would say, I guess.
Yeah, I guess a related question is what the vision actually is, say, 2 years from now. Whether do we want to actively discourage the use of Slack in this context? I mean, it is an effective communication tool, but as Meg emphasizes, it's not a useful archive of information in that sense.
Even on the construction project, we have always said that anything that concludes in Slack needs to get captured elsewhere and be documented properly. The same goes for Confluence. The same goes for things that happen in Jira. These are all productivity tools that help you to get to a certain point. Yeah. When you reach that point and a decision has been made, it is supposed to be documented and put into our documentation archive.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Oh, question. Yes.
Do we know that LSTC Slack will continue to be supported on a long time frame? Is there any discussion about whether that will still be there as a tool?
It's my understanding that that will stay. Yeah. Can I just check that the remote participants are hearing the questions? Yes, good. Okay. Okay, so which topics do people want to, or the respondents want to receive most information about? Right now, there still seems to be a thirst for general information, and that's something that we've tried to improve over the time. I think we can still try to improve that some more. Interestingly, in second place now is commissioning strategy. And I think it's no surprise that commissioning has come in at the second, at the spot number 2 for what people want information about. And I've just pointed out there that in the previous survey, the second spot was actually the Rubin Science Platform. Actually, it was pipelines, pointing to the wrong one there. It was pipelines in 2017, and now it's commissioning strategy. So I think we'll be making efforts based on this. Like we would take the top 5 and ensure that we try to put information out that is about those, because that's what people are indicating that they're interested in.
Can I ask a question of what you've been sending out? You tell me what you're going to focus on, but if we ask for the reflection, have the communications since that survey focused on those things? Or if we say the last year, right, has the communication strategy hit those things, in your opinion?
In the ones that are showing on that slide there?
Yeah,
Or?
so for the needs that people are talking about, this is what I want to receive more information about. If we take a reflective look of what has been the communications that have gone out, do you feel that they've hit these? You know, it's been mostly successful, or we've been targeting something else, right? And so this is going to give us information of where we need to pivot.
Yeah.
How do you reflect? I guess I want the reflection of what this says compared to what, your team's strategy has been.
Yeah, I think we've been, general information, definitely, that's what we do consistently. I would say that we have not focused that much on the commissioning side of things, only where there was like the call for commissioning in kinds and things like that, did we focus on that. So I think this is an area that we need to improve on. So we really do need to take away this data and focus on having more information about those areas. Sorry, Meg, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Chuck, unmute yourself.
Chuck. Yeah.
Button on the bottom.
It's green now.
Move it over close to you.
People hearing me, usually it's not a problem. So specifically with the commissioning strategy, but also more generally with some of these high priority topics, did you get specifics about I'll use commissioning strategy as a use case. That's a pretty generalized statement, right? They want to hear more information about commissioning strategy. Well, do we have specifics on how we could address that communication better? I guess when I see this list, it's not sure what actionable things we can do based solely on this without getting more specific input.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So we know where people are going for their information, right? So if we put commissioning information on those places where people are going to get their information, then we should hit the right spot.
Yeah, but I guess I'm again using the commissioning as a case in point because it's staring us square in the face at the moment. I mean, we can completely inundate all information channels with details about commissioning. I don't think that's what people are after. So
I don't, but I think I think we can safely say they're after a little bit more than what we're able to give them, right? Than what we have been giving them at the time.
I'd just like to point out there's an avenue of your friendly SAC. You could ask and say, what is it that you think the community wants to know? Because that's part of our role. Also, the science collaboration co-chairs, right, and science collaboration liaisons, right? So there's a commissioning liaison to every science collaboration. So I think I can speak for myself, but I say that I'm sure I'd be happy to give feedback on that. But I'm sure these multiple avenues would be very would be very happy to give feedback if they got the question, what would you like us to send out about the commissioning strategy and how, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess
so I would say I would suggest that those are avenues to get pretty quick feedback of both the SAC and the science collaboration, co-chairs as well as the commissioning liaisons as a way of giving that feedback.
So given that we're at the SAC meeting here today, consider the question posed to the SAC. What is it the SAC thinks would be most useful to put forward regarding more details about commissioning?
So the SAC puts out a report to you after this meeting or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay, we will put that into it. Leanne, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if I look at this list, I wouldn't interpret it necessarily as we did a really good job in this area, but we did a bad job here on the other area. I think it's actually very timely. I mean, people will always want general product information. That's clear. We give a lot of talks, at least from data management and through the system performance department and our operations on the science platform. And more recently, Yusra and team have been giving a lot of talks and information on the science pipeline. So I'm not at all surprised that they're not the ones people want more information on, because we've been doing a lot more recently, and especially with DP 0.1 and 2, that's come much more to the forefront naturally. So that information's coming out. I interpret people wanting more on commissioning strategy, not because anyone's done a bad job, but because we're going into commissioning and we've had these AOs and now people are starting to get involved and they're excited about it and it's what's most timely.
Yes.
And I predict in a year or two, event brokers will catch up with commissioning for the same reasons.
Yeah, I think it definitely is phase driven, and it's where we are right now, and that's why that came.
So no one should interpret this as how, oh, we've done a bad job on X and Y. I don't think anyone.
No, I hope nobody was
timely.
interpreting it like that. That was not how it was meant to be communicated. Anyone? Okay.
Please, go on.
So we had an EPO question in 2017. We wanted to make sure we carried that over into the survey this year. So we asked how you would like to get information about potential opportunities to engage in and contribute to EPO. Actually, the results were the same as 2017 through the, get information by emailing the science community and through the science collaborations. I say that it was the same as 2017. I'm not sure that that was done. I will have to probably turn to Lauren for that. But let me just go to the next slide very quickly, and we can then see if there's questions. It was an open text question again on how Rubin can help with communications and with EPO materials, etc. Being an open text question, I had to put all that information into buckets, and the 3 buckets are in the category column there. The feedback is what the comments that came in as the answers to that question, and the response is what I have put in there as responding to that feedback. There's quite a lot of information there. You can read through that, but I'm only going to focus on 2 of those. And one was production help. It's very difficult to address this one. EPO has a charge. They have requirements. They have to deliver to those requirements. So being able to help necessarily with ad hoc requests for production help with materials, graphics, educational pieces is very difficult for them, given that they have requirements to deliver on. And how to communicate, a workshop on how to communicate. We did have a session a few years ago at the Project Community Workshop on that. I think that's something that we can do again. And communication, it comes in a lot of forms, and the written form is another one that we really do want to focus on in the future, maybe like a journalist workshop or writer's workshop on really how to learn how to write about Rubin Observatory and the survey. Okay, we're nearly close to the end, even though I think I'm well over my time. Are you satisfied with the options of initiating communication? Now, looking at numbers 4 and 5, so we're somewhere near 70%. That is a lot higher than it used to be. So we have actually improved in that area. It was 45% in 2017. It's as frequent as I would like. Again, that is higher than it was in 2017 at the previous survey. So again, we've increased, but I feel like we could probably do much better in this area still. And with the quality of communication, that's also quite a good result there. And I think that we have improved the quality of our communication. We touched on the topic of having too many channels and where information gets stored and how it gets documented. We really do have a lot of communication channels. What I captured here was just the comments that came in when there was a box for anything else you want to tell us. And the overriding response was too many communications channels. Well, what I did with that was I went onto Google and typed in too many communications channels. And this is the result I got. So we are not alone. That is what I want to stress here. Yes, it is an issue, but it's an issue that everyone is facing. It's causing anxiety, it's causing mental health, it's causing all kinds of issues. This is something that is serious. We do need to look into it. I don't have the answer. I'm happy to hear of any ideas people might have, but information overload and too many channels of information is a thing. But we do try to use this to our advantage, remembering that people consume information in different ways. People have their favorite places to go to get information. What we try to do is put it in all the different places that we can in order to try to engage people and get the information in front of them. The one thing I don't like to hear is people saying, well, I didn't know. How was I supposed to know that? That's the issue that I try to address. And I think the result of that is possibly too many communications channels for some people. Okay, to conclude, the frequency of communication has room for improvement. The quality of communication, we've worked on it. We'll continue to work on that. And the ease of initiating communications with the project seems to have improved. Again, we'll be watching for these. We've got to see how this evolves. The project is evolving. We're going into operation, into commissioning, into operations. And we've just got to keep tabs on how we're doing. And I'm happy to hear any feedback from anyone on how we can improve in any of the areas you saw here or any others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me actually start by asking the folks on Blue Jeans, the SAC members, whether they have further questions or comments, concerns, others. Well, this issue. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Meg, was that you?
Whose turn is it?
Yeah, Monsi and Charles have their hands up.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, David, you're monitoring the Blue Jeans. Why don't you just call on whoever seems to have their hands up first?
Okay. So let's start with Monsi.
Hi. So I just wanted to say that, since we started the communications discussion on the SAC, I think there's been a lot of improvement. So I wanted to just commend the communications team on that. And in particular, an example of that is, I think there's this project status page that is live that gets updated on the commissioning schedule. And a lot of people have, sort of pointed that out as being very useful because, some people are interested in the details, but most people really want to know when first light is going to happen, when the survey is going to begin. And having a live page, that project status page that gets updated is a great step in that direction.
Okay. Charles?
Thank you. I wanted to address the EPO section specifically, Ranpal. As we move forward out from just the people working on the collaboration to try to spread the word of Rubin to all people, including colleges, K-12 classrooms, and astronomy clubs and people like that all over the world, their communications methods are very fractured. But it's really important to get their buy-in because we can only take an example from the James Webb Space Telescope strategy where literally the entire world was captivated for a week about their cool new results. We want to do that for Rubin as well. Is there a deeper thought at this moment on the communications team on how to ramp that up in about a year, where we're really not just saturating the channels that we're used to using as community members or as scientists, but out to the public in a way that NASA seems to have done pretty well?
I think there's two parts to that. One part is to do with First Light and the whole campaign that will go around First Light, engaging the public, ensuring that the world knows what's coming. And yes, we were eyeing up everything that was happening with James Webb and looking to see, well, how does that convert over to when we will do First Light? Then there's the bit that goes beyond that, and that really is EPO, and I should let Lauren answer that.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of how we're going to continue to promote the observatory outside of First Light, it's a good question. And it depends on the audience. So specifically for the general public, the channels that we're most interested in are social media. That's where people are, right? That's how I find out about things that are outside of my job, or on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. This is the the reality that we live in, and we're going to put a lot of effort into ramping all of that up starting next year. To be producing content more regularly so people know to follow those channels if they want to see cool things about the space and about the observatory. You also specifically mentioned educators, which is another audience that we're really concerned about. And we're looking specifically at where do they like to get information to learn about different things that they can bring into their classrooms. So we've set up specifically, so in the US in particular, a lot of teachers are actually on Facebook. That's how they get a lot of their information and self-organize. So we've started a community of practice there. As well as an email listserv. Those were the two that sort of seemed to hit the most amount of teachers that we could, and monitoring those specifically with education information so they can learn more about the program and how to bring our materials into their classrooms.
Thank you. And make sure, please, that we all know the difference between a planet and a chorizo.
Will do.
Meg.
I think I want to echo the Monsi's praise that it's very clear there's been a lot of progress in communications and things that have improved significantly with this survey from the last time. So to acknowledge that effort from the communications team. I think I want to highlight my concern about community because it's not the thing people are looking at. And it continues to be pushed, and it's not, to me, with the fact it didn't make it into the top 2 is concerning. And that maybe there needs to be a rethink of whether community is where information should be stored or whether that's the Rubin website, somewhere more permanent, rather. And that, because it's been around, right, more when the survey happened. And so the fact that it's still not in the top 2, but that's where we're being really pushed right now to be communicating, my worry is that people aren't there. They're using Slack and reaching out directly to people, and that may not necessarily change when you start operations because people are so used to sending an email, right, or reaching out. And so I think that question about whether it's all deaf people that were that 100, I think it was asked what science collaborations people were in, I think. So it might be something to be backed out, or whether this needs to be done again, right, to see if that effect is there, because that's worrying to me that it means people still aren't going to community, even though that's the preferred project/operations choice of communicating. Even with DP0, that it didn't necessarily get into the top 2. So just something that's come up for me is, why isn't community being that? And I don't think it's necessarily the instantaneousness, but I think it's something else tied to that. So just something to raise, or maybe for the communications team and CET to think about, is what's stopping people from switching to community or thinking about community as the place to be, particularly given DP0 has been around for a bit.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Meg. I did feel that community hasn't been around that long, and that was why perhaps it hasn't bubbled up higher up in that list. But I'll let Melissa comment.
Yeah, I can comment that, so first the phrase was used, like information being stored in community, and that's definitely like not the function of community. We have web pages, we have documentation, issues that get raised in the community forum. Yes, it's nice that the forum allows you to search for people with similar issues as you, but what we do is we take those issues out, and when there are solutions, we put them in the documentation. So I know there's some concern that like information gets lost in the forum, but we are working to pull it out, and there's documentation. So it's not, community is not an information storage area. And then for the second part about use, so I think the survey just isn't capturing maybe our delegates' use, because now that we do have actual users, we're seeing a lot of them do come to the support category within community and are asking questions there. So it's not been reflected in the survey, but we have seen increased use of the forum over Data Preview 0 at a level that was about kind of what we expected. We know it takes time for people to get used to just a new platform in general. So again, I'm not super concerned. I mean, I am always constantly worried about it because that's my job. Yeah, I think it's not time to like abandon it or look for different models yet. events.
And I don't know if the delegates were part of the audience that responded to this survey.
Just, are you doing the same thing for Slack as community, pulling out information and putting it online when it's useful?
No, because we don't. Slack is for real-time communications. It's where people who are doing development work talk in real time as if you drop into someone's office. So, I mean, community engagement team doesn't pull things out, but certainly like within project staff, they'll be putting things into documentation, doing the documentation development work there. So yes and no.
Yeah, I mean, like if a change control it gets discussed on Slack, that goes into change control system eventually. You know, it's all captured properly.
Okay, we are, as we knew would happen, somewhat behind time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we had no more raised hand, but there was a comment from Josh on. Josh, do you want to?
Oh, sure. I was just thinking that while message boards like Community are a frequent way of people communicating online in general, they're not really something that the astronomical community is used to using for professional communications, and so I think that could be part of the reason that the uptake maybe hasn't been what would be wanted. People are much more used to sending an email or going on Slack than they are to posting a question somewhere and then going and following up and seeing if it was answered and so on.
Okay, I'd like to suggest we move on. We can, Leanne, burning comment.
Can I just make a comment to the comment that was just made? I mean, I agree that people are much more used to just sending an email to someone or going on Slack and asking questions, but that model won't scale to a global community of 10,000 users. It's just simple. We'll inundate people with questions. Everyone will get Slack messages. They'll keel over. They'll be overloaded, and they'll quit, and they'll walk away, and it just won't scale. And so I absolutely agree with what was just said. People are used to doing that. We have to change the culture because we're growing it to a much larger scale than we've ever been at before, and it won't scale. That model.
Agreed. And the beauty of the forum is that it's not just one team answering all the questions. It's the community answering the questions.
Okay, I would like to move on. So Lauren, you're going to tell us about the website.
You want the handheld or do you want the?
I'll just trade it for now. Thanks.
And introduce yourself when you start.
Yeah, apologies for not having a title slide. My name is Lauren Corlies. I'm the head of education and public outreach. And I was asked to talk about the future of the Rubin website. And so I pulled up this graphic because what do we even mean by the Rubin website? Because that gets a little bit complicated, which I think is also part of the confusion. So right now we have lsst.org. You can see us now, fiscal year 22, since that's the way we like to think about things on the project. And lsst.org is really the home of all of this information that I think of as being really for two different audiences. So there's information that is for the general public, which can include scientists, right, like history of the observatory, that sort of thing, but just the general information that a average person would want to know about the observatory. And then there's also a lot of information that I think of as for scientists. So the really technical information that you and I all want to know to be able to do our science, but if a member of the general public comes to the observatory and that's the first and only thing that they're seeing over and over again, then that's kind of a intimidating place to enter. And it definitely is a place where you think, oh, this website wasn't built for me, and you leave. And so coming back to this idea of how are we telling people about the observatory? How are we getting them excited about it, building that name recognition? Part of that has to be having a space like a website online for people to be able to go to learn more and not to just go away and forget that the observatory ever existed. And so there's this idea of separating the content for these two audiences as we move into operations. And so that's something that my team has been working on, EPO. We've built a new website, a public-facing website for the observatory and operations that will serve this public audience. And so you can see that's where this transition happens in fiscal year 23 to a new website for the public. That does not necessarily affect the scientist information right away. So that information is currently maintained and updated at lsst.org by Melissa and her team, and that will continue to be true for the next fiscal year. And then we have an idea, a plan to also build a new website for the scientists to be able to revamp, reorganize all of the content that we have there. But that's outside of the realm of EPO. So figuring out who and when is exactly going to build that website is a thing that we're still working out. So something that I wanted to raise is there's a little bit of uncertainty. But the other thing I wanted to add is, yes, there's that uncertainty, but lsst.org can continue to exist while we figure it out. So this is the timeline that maybe we would like to work to. If something shifts or we start earlier, there will always be a home for this content that scientists will be able to go and to find. The other pieces that I pull out here are less important than this main site, but there's project.lsst.org, which will continue on throughout construction. The community platform, which we discussed about, will continue on into operations. And then also recognizing that there are some sites that we provide for the science collaborations. So keeping our eyes on that so that those don't disappear too.
So just a clarification.
Yeah.
lsst.org will continue or will not continue?
It will continue. The scientist information will be continued to be updated starting for the future until they create a new site. In October, the plan is to transition all of the new public-facing content to the new site. Okay. So lsst.org will continue to exist. We're not going to do the effort to pull information down. Yes. It just won't be maintained the way that the new site will be for the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is, nobody should be looking at lsst.org after a certain point.
That's right. Yeah.
Just to clarify, so the line at the bottom with science collaborations, am I correct that that is science.lsst.org? That's where the SC's websites are currently maintained for most of the collaborations?
It gets complicated. I think maybe that's where they're all aggregated. Some science collaborations run their own sites. Some I think are hosted through communications. And so that web starts to get tricky, but just making sure we're not leaving anyone without a website is on our mind. Mm-hmm. So
but for I think it's 6 out of 8 of the collaborations that do use science.lsst.org,
okay.
It would be good for that to be guaranteed to stick around for that bottom line there.
So I'd say that's outside of what EPO is responsible for, but I think it's good to note that here. But that's sort of raising this question of who then is responsible for that kind of content, that infrastructure. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Lauren? So the transition from lsst.org to rubinobservatory.org, to what extent is that just kind of changing the name, or is it really a grounds up redesign?
Well, I'm very glad you asked because I can answer that question with my next slide. So hopefully it'll come up. So I'm putting the link here. So this is something I'm going to be showing off at my plenary on Thursday too, but you can go to this link right now to see the new public-facing site that we'll be launching in October. So I would clarify that this is, a super advanced prototype. We'll continue to add content. There's some bugs that we're continuing to work out, but this is the site as it will be launched in October for the most part. So you can go and click through it now. I wasn't sure how interactive this would be, so I also took a little screen video of what the site looks like. So it is a total redesign. So this is the homepage. You can see it's a lot more visually driven. We're trying to make it look modern, like a thing that's directing the public to the information that they want to find. So visual information about the education program, the news of the observatory is really easy to click on. In the menu, you'll see we're going to offer the site in English and Spanish, so that content's also available for people in Chile. Scrolling through the menus, you can see all the different kinds of content we're offering, all the history, about sort of information you'd expect to find on a site like this, as well as some other tabs that I find really exciting, including Explore. This is sort of the outreach part of the website. Where can people go and learn fun things that are written for them about the science goals, about the technology? We're adding all these images that, we're hoping people will really respond to. It's all written in a way that is conversational, easy to understand. And there's also a gallery. So slideshows will also have, visual information. Not everyone wants to read paragraphs about things, so they can go and learn about the observatory in that way. As well as this is being revamped. If you go there now, the link looks a little different. But this idea of being able to download content, we were putting in mock images just to play around with our things. But the idea is here's these multimedia assets that our team is creating that you can download in a variety of formats and be able to use for your own outreach efforts. So that was one of the things that Ranpal was noting in her survey, is that having things like this would help people do their outreach. So we've created a whole lot of graphics that will be available for people on day one. And then I can imagine in the future, being able to come to us with a specific request for a specific talk, we might not be able to accommodate, but sort of crowdsourcing, taking polls of and if 30 people all tell us we're trying to explain this one thing and we wish we had a graphic, then that would be the kind of thing that we could work to create graphics for and then put on the website so everyone can go and download them. And that was my last slide. I really tried to leave it open for discussion and to let people click around the website and ask me any questions.
So I'm not sure if this question's for you, but I think this is great, and I think it's great that you're thinking about what the public needs.
Yeah.
But I will say my experience with the LSST website is that it's not very easily navigatable, and I can almost never find the things that I need easily. And so my concern with this is that I get that your job is only the EPO.
Right.
I guess I was hoping we were going to hear about as well about the other side of this, which is in 2 years, right, and sometime in 2024, if data is going to flow, right, how is it that we're going to find information that is in multitude of documents? Because you can't expect all of us to go into 5 PDFs to find something, right, or understand how the cadence was selected, right, where you're going to want that on a website. And so I guess it sounds like that's not thought about yet or fully decided. And I guess I was really hoping that would have also been a part of this. And so I'm wondering, I'd like to know what's the timeline for thinking about this? Because as commissioning data comes in, right, people are going to need these resources, but it doesn't seem like these pages the new pages for the science community would be ready until very close to the time that operation starts. And that could be problematic of people not knowing where to go. And now it looks all different, right? And how to use that tool. Because you don't want to be people Googling to go find the answer, right? It's why the Gemini website got redone, because all the staff, we Googled to find the stuff because we couldn't find it ourselves on our website when I was still working there. Right. That was one of the complaints. So we don't want that scenario, I think, for Rubin. And so I'm just wondering if someone can talk about what's happening with that other half. Like, is there a timeline for that decision being made of who owns that building creating of the new page for the science community?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's a question for Bob. I'm looking at him over here.
Hi, Meg. This is Bob Blum. No, there is no yet the decision, but we are discussing internally how to move ahead with understanding where the content will. We know where the content for the 4 scientist pages will be developed. It will be the community engagement team. We don't yet know exactly what the infrastructure will look like and how it is going to be hooked up to RubinObservatory.org. We are talking with our management board right now about this set of web pages and how they will look and where they will be served from. So that's Slack and Noir Lab, and we hope to have progress on that in the next months, and then we'll lay out a plan for how to get the content where it needs to be and build up the infrastructure, the underlying web infrastructure for those pages, but we don't have it right now.
Okay. Well, I think the SAC will be super interested in hearing the details. I think that's a role that the SAC can indeed play to give feedback, and if you would like detailed feedback, that is something I can imagine we could.
And the user community, or the user committee as well.
Yeah, the user committee as well. Actually, Matt, you're here. I don't know if you want to jump in and give an immediate opinion. Matt Holman chairs the users committee. I don't know if you want to say anything. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. What Matt just said is that the users committee will be meeting on Friday morning, right? And I imagine this will be a topic of discussion, among others.
Yeah. So just to be clear, this part of it is squarely on the operations team. The construction team had, only ever signed up to do the outward-facing website, and so this is something that we need to do. And the EPO team, as Lauren mentioned, is headed into operations in fiscal year 23. So this will be one of the things we'll start working on, not necessarily with the EPO team, but generally how to connect all the web pages and build up the infrastructure.
Okay, Charles, is his hand raised?
Looking at the speaker like there's
Lauren,
someone there.
Hi, Lauren. I want to commend you and your team. This is terrific. Seeing this RubinObs.org prototype is exactly what we need. It looks like you'll be able to access it on a phone, which is where the vast majority of that kind of thing will happen. It looks the observatory itself looks like a star base or maybe a nuclear submarine or something, which is terrific. And I believe it is not too soon at all for you to be doing this, because in 2 to 3 years, especially if the citizen science stuff gets moving as we hope, there may be just as much science being done from the public as they might be done by our team members. Different kind of science, but certainly volume-wise, tremendously important. So when I heard that you said that we're not sure yet who's going to create this public-facing observatory, I have a little bit of a concern. Could you update that a little bit more on that? And hopefully this is just sort of a flux thing, that something will be determined in the next few weeks or months or something. But could you just give us an update on that aspect of the construction of this new site, please?
I'm sorry, I said, I don't remember. Yeah.
You said something along the lines of, I'm not sure who's going to create the site yet, or something like that?
Oh, for the scientists.
Yes.
That's
for
right.
the public, is that not an issue? You guys have that in hand, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's that link that you can click on. That's ready to go. The infrastructure is all hosted, served the way that it would be. It's all ready for production, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
and so
we're working out like a few bugs, like maybe the flow is a little bit slower than we would like. Like we're at that level of tinkering. Everything is in place and ready to go, including the content. So
is there a plan to formal rollout and an announcement to the world of here it is? And
yeah, that's right. So that's the next thing. So this is sort of the PCW the team has been thinking of as like our soft launch. This is our first like really sort of showing it to a larger group of people outside of the project. So this, and on Thursday, I'm going to demo the entire program that we've built, not just the website, and then figuring out how to launch all of that and get people recognizing that a lot of these resources exist for them as part of the plan as we move into operations. We've already started that with the education program this summer, hosting workshops, building partnerships, doing all of that. But for some of these more general public-facing things, yeah, that's a task for this fall.
Okay.
So.
Good.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lauren.
Yeah.
David, do we have any other?
I have a question. Have you kind of worked out a process for getting feedback from different constituencies on the website?
Yeah, so we've been using different things, but at this point, we now at the bottom of the website have a contact us form. And one of the things that you can select from the drop-down menu is website feedback. So if you go and send that, that'll send an email directly to the team for us to be able to see and address depending on the comments that we get. So that's going to be our newest method moving forward. If there's anything bigger that you would like to discuss, you could talk with me directly, but this is sort of a...
I think it's worth additionally, identifying particular groups of people and actually finding someone and asking them just really, can you go through the website, please, and give us comments on usability and whether you think it asks the kind of the questions you would have, like a teacher, is this like you could use in your classroom? And
yeah, so we have been doing that. So at multiple stages of the design of this website, we mostly use the project as a source of just people who would have time to give us to say, like, can you navigate this? Can you find the sorts of information that you're looking for? And so that was all successful. We've had other people of the project go in and look at every site and leave us every page on this site and leave us detailed comments on every single thing, as well as to this larger, if you see something, comment on us. And then specifically for the education program, we've been testing everything with teachers and students in classrooms. Something like over 5,000 students and teachers have looked through the program. So we're really confident about that. So that material in particular, it's so specific for a classroom that we really wanted to make sure that it was going to serve the need we were trying to meet.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so we've been doing it throughout. We've been building this website for about 3 years now. So it's just been a long process of us getting feedback and iterating it into this final design. But the nice thing about the website is we can always incorporate more feedback. So,
Mansi, have your hand raised?
I just had a quick comment. So this is great, but all the different components of it are coming online on different timescales, like the public pages, the scientist pages, etc. So I think one thing to keep in mind is all the URL redirects, right? Because some people have the old page bookmarked, some will go first to the new page. Google search will pop up a different thing. So just clever URL redirects for whatever the latest page is for the scientists, for the public, from these different lssd.org, Rubin, obs.org, observatory.org. That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. It's definitely something we think about, but it's always worth saying again. So it's going to be a little bit tricky for a few years while we make this sort of transition, but we'll be able to make it work.
Okay. If there are no other comments, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
As is inevitable, we are behind schedule, but that's okay. We'll make it work. So the next, we're going to switch topics considerably to talking about the the Survey Coordination Optimization Committee. I think I got that acronym correct. Which Federica, what's that?
Survey Cadence Optimization.
Oh, sorry about that. I was close. And Federica Bianco chairs that committee, and I know it's going to be a topic of extensive discussion later in this meeting, but the SAC is eager to hear where things stand and where the sort of the interesting challenges ahead are. Okay, folks remote can see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you. Oops. Okay.
Great. Hello, thank you. My name is Federica Bianco. I was the Science Collaborations Coordinator for a long time, so you may know me because of that. And I am now the Deputy Project Scientist for Construction, and as part of that role, I have the responsibility of leading the Science Cadence Optimization Committee, which is tasked with making recommendations on the details of the cadence that LSST will pursue to the Director of Operation, Bob Blum. I have several slides, but in the interest of time, we'll go through them rather quickly, and I would like this to be mostly discussion-based. I do want to acknowledge the committee and all of its members. I'm going to go through the list of names in order to recognize them. Franz Bauer, Sarah Bro, Renee Hodzek, Mansi Kazlival, Knut Olsen, Hiranya Perez, Meg Schwamm, Dan Skolnick, Colin Slater, and Jay Strader. Ex officio is Lynn Jones and myself, and also the survey strategy team, Lynn Jones and Peter Joachim. I want to emphasize that this committee, of all the committees that I've ever chaired, is the one that holds perhaps the greatest responsibility. It's a community-facing committee that tries to make deliberations in a very transparent way, and it is part of a commitment to Rubin that Rubin made to engage and allow the community at large to participate in its decisions. So this committee is collecting and analyzing and reviewing the input of the community, so of your own, who are here, and many, many more people, on what cadence LSST should use to really maximize the many science cases that it intends to pursue. It is a difficult job, as you may imagine. We're collecting information from a community of 2,000 scientists. And it is a very difficult optimization process that requires both considerations of all the input that we get and domain knowledge at large. So the people that are on the committee, which is important for what we'll discuss later, which is the rotation on this committee, cover altogether all science areas that are of interest to LSST, which are basically all science areas of astrophysics, from solar system, galaxy, transients, dark sector and cosmology, and also galaxies, AGNs, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to recognize the enormous amount of effort that this takes and the enormous amount of responsibilities that this entails, and really thank all the people that are participating in this work. The committee was created, a little bit of history in the interest of time. Perhaps this is not as interesting right now, and the slides are public. But just to say that this has been going on, it's in its third year, so it was funded in 2020. It was created by and appointed by the SAC, and we are heading towards our phase 2 recommendations in December 2022. The first set of recommendations were made in December 2021, and they led to a new set of simulations of the Rubin strategies, which we are now analyzing and inviting the community to analyze and help us analyze, which will lead to the phase 2 recommendations for the survey with which Rubin LSST will begin. This is a standing committee of Rubin operations, so the committee will continue to exist, will continue to evaluate the success of the survey strategy and make recommendations to improvement as the landscape of the science that we try to pursue evolve, as well as our knowledge of the system. I came on board on this committee in roughly February 2022 with my new role of Deputy Project Scientist. The former chair is Zelko Yezevich, who stepped up into the position of Construction Director and down from this committee. What I think I can bring to this committee is a perspective from being very embedded in the science collaboration and from having seen how it looks to work with this committee from the outside, from the community perspective. Of course, there has been a transition process, and I want to also thank again the committee members for their patience as I was catching up and understanding the inner working of the committee and figuring out how we can work together.
Can you explain what you mean by how that can be adapted to my leadership style? What have you changed? If you go back to the previous slide.
Communication between committee members and use of tools and organization of meetings and all of that. I think I had to figure out what was being done and how things were happening before and figuring out how that works with the way in which I organize things, in the way in which I am naturally drawn, let's say, to organize things. And I think that requires flexibility on both sides, and I'm very appreciative of that. That makes sense?
Okay.
I'll take it as a yes. So a bit more current, what are we doing right now? So as I mentioned, the SCOC made recommendations, what we call the phase 1 recommendations in December 2021. That is a document that indicates what our current prospective throughputs for different science cases based on different strategy, different observing strategy perspectives, prospects. And it made recommendation for a new set of simulations of the observing strategy that will focus on areas that were not explored sufficiently, according to our committee, in the previous rounds of simulations. So these simulations go by the name of OPSIM version 2.0 and OPSIM version 2.1, and they were released sort of in 2 stages in November 2021 and in April 2022, the latest version. Altogether, they collect 265 simulations of the observing strategy. And I hope that number gives more emphasis to what I mentioned earlier, that this is a difficult job. The things that we're particularly looking in these simulations, this is perhaps a bit technical, but the things that we're particularly looking in these simulations are possible implementations of the rolling strategy of including triplets in the set of observations, so observing the same patch of sky 3 times over 1 or 2 days to address time scales that would be neglected otherwise. There's a couple of families that do this, varying the exposure time, including microsurveys, refining the footprint overall, including the galactic footprint and the North Ecliptic Spur in particular, and implementations of the deep drilling fields. Some of these topics are still in the process of being simulated in more and more detail, and in an iterative process where the SCOC looks at the question that we're asking ourselves, which I'll show you in a second, and the simulations, and try to understand what simulations support our answers and what simulations are needed or what modifications are needed to provide an answer. The questions that we broke down, we broke down our deliberations into questions. This was done for the phase 1 recommendation, and we did that again for phase 2 recommendations. And we came up with 8 specific areas on which we will provide recommendations. Those areas were collaboratively edited by the entire committee in a collaborative writing process, and they are the list on the right of the screen. On the left of the screen, you see the list of the previous questions. So you see that there is some overlap, which indicates that some things had been reviewed in phase 1, but we needed a more in-depth review in phase 2 and some new entries. So I'm going to read them out. We are making considerations about the filter distribution, the nightly visit pairs and triplets, the footprint, the rolling cadence, the deep drilling field strategy, early science, time allocation for targets of opportunity, and microsurveys. In a bit more details, the way in which we have worked on this. I'll talk about the community input next. Perhaps I'm thinking the slides should have been swapped. But the way in which we're working on this, we have members of the committee assigned to subcommittees that are tasked with doing a first review of the community input for each one of the questions. They provide an internal report, which we then review as a committee altogether, which leads to us making recommendations. You will hear the preliminary, not even the preliminary version, but you will hear at what point of this process we are, what recommendations we're thinking to make at this stage at the survey strategy session on Tuesday, with Lynn Johns, where Lynn Johns will present for each one of these questions what is our current position. And this will lead to a report, like I mentioned, in December 2022. You see committee members assigned to 4 of the 8 questions. These are a bit, that means there are 5 committee members on each sub-question. It's a bit large, but having 5 people allows us to not be really impaired if one of the members doesn't have time at that point in time to dedicate to the question. And in bold,
can I ask about that?
Yes, please.
Can you talk about when this review happened? Because 5 people does seem like a lot to me. But also this is unpaid work. And so I'm just wondering, can you talk about timeline a little bit of when from the time that 2.0 simulations were released, when did all this work happen? Just to give people a context on the schedule, because I don't see that on the community page that you linked to.
I can, and I do have a slider at the bottom in 1 slide or 2. So if you don't mind waiting until that, I'll get to that with the visual aid in a minute. I don't know why I'm looking back. Is that okay? Oh, it is right here. There you go. So essentially at the bottom, this is a very, very cheap timeline, but at the bottom you sort of see like the whole lifetime of the committee, including the future in blue dots. So the creation of the committee is all the way on the left in December 2020. And right now we are at the PCW, so we are at the first blue dot. So the review of the committee, essentially the formation of the subgroups and the work of the subgroup has been done. The subgroups have worked independently, so some subgroups were more prompt than others to organize and answer the question. But it's been ongoing since basically end of March through now. Of the 8 groups, we have preliminary reports that have been shared with the committee for 5 of them. Yes, for 5 of them, and I will mention which ones are more suspended in a few slides. And the work is ongoing and will continue until December 2022. But there is an important benchmark here, which is the workshop, which we will hold in the 2nd week of November. So that's a workshop, and it's the last opportunity that we have to directly interface as a committee with the community and receive input on what at that point we'll have as preliminary draft of our recommendation, such that the community can really catch if there are any red herrings or red flags, and we can act promptly to resolve them. That requires a fair amount of coordination and just, as Max mentioned, unpaid work on both sides. On the side of the committee, which again has been working extremely hard in the subgroups and leading up to today, and will continue to work just as hard, if not harder, through December. And on the community, which has the responsibility of communicating to the committee what they see from their perspective on the simulations and in our report and recommendations.
So can you comment on what you have on your slides, which you've written early in 2022, the SCOC, the SCOC decided unanimously that asking for additional white papers were significant burden.
I'm going to get to that
Is
in
that
2
you're going to
seconds.
get to that?
I was exactly going to get to that. That was honestly my next point, which is how do we get community input? How do we get community? How have we historically, and how are we getting community input now? So in 2018, a series of white paper, a call for white paper was, a solicitation for white paper was published by Rubin Observatory, white papers on survey strategy. I think I don't have time to get into that, but the metric analysis framework is the framework that we use to analyze the survey strategies. So the community, when they have an idea for changes of the survey strategy or in support of a particular version of the survey strategy, what we ask them to do is to write code that quantifies the success of that survey strategy. And the code is to be written and integrated into an API or into a software package, which Lynn Jones has written a few years ago. And Lynn and Peter work on integrating the code that the community provides and running it against the OPSIMs, thus telling us which OPSIM supports a particular science case. If this call to write maps is a little bit older than that, but a large fraction of the community began writing maps for the white papers of 2018. And we also had a cadence notes call with more specific questions and maps to go with them in 2021, and a deadline for submitting maps to the committee, which was December 2021, submitting maps through pull requests to the GitHub public-facing software home. Early when I stepped into the committee, we asked ourselves whether we wanted to have another call for another set of recommendations that will come in the form of a note or a white paper. And we decided that that would have been a burden on the community, which was pretty fatigued by the earlier stages, so we decided not to ask for those kind of contributions. One important point to this is that the committee has liaisons, assigned liaisons among its members to each of the science collaborations. So for the science collaborations, there is a direct venue to talk to the community, to talk to the committee through these liaisons. This does create a bit of imbalance between what you can do as a science collaboration member and what you can do as a community member. But we also have public-facing composition and community pages that, in principle, the community can use to share their thoughts and comments. I covered the second bullet point, which is the influx of maps. So if you look at the bottom of my cheap time scale, there are 3 arrows that are coming to sort of near now. So even though we didn't ask for reports from the community, some parts of the community have produced reports which complicated a little bit the timeline of our work. So the first report was produced by the Solar System Science Collaboration. I'm going to say March 2021 is when we received the Meg can confirm this. And other science collaborations have seen this report, the existence of this report, and also wanted to write reports, making sure that they had equal, similar ways to contribute their thoughts and advocate for their science. So we then received a TVS Transient and Variable Star Science Collaboration extragalactic report and a Transient and Variable Star Science Collaboration joined with the Milky Way Science with the Stars Milky Way Local Volume Science Collaboration report. And just recently we have received a desk report. This is a little bit complicated because we're now receiving reports at different points in time, and we had to integrate those reports and those considerations into our working. So perhaps there is a lesson learned here to be more clear. I think maybe I have that in the next slide. Yes, to be more clear and set boundaries more proactively in which are the way in which we can communicate most effectively with the community at any step of our work. And this also goes for how the maps are being integrated in the OPSIM, integrating the code that the community is producing into the OPSIM. Software integration is a difficult job to begin with. And software integration with such a large community of known software developers has been extremely, extremely difficult from my perspective from the outside. And I want to
So
commend
I'm not quite sure how this fits together. So you didn't answer my question, which is why did the community feel they needed to send reports if the SCOC felt that that was a huge burden? Because then it meant that the community did that burden and did that work because there was some need they felt they needed to do to be heard. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on why it all went that way. You may have received one, but why did the other science collaborations then decide that they needed to have a report?
Yep,
rather
that's
than
a very
like
fair
SCOC
question.
evaluation. So I'm wondering, I'd love to hear your thought on that.
That's a very fair question. And, you know, if I really wanted to answer it, I would have to ask the community why they felt the need to do that. But I think one thing that I want to say is that the responsibilities of the liaisons and the modes of interaction of the liaisons with the science collaboration were fairly loosely defined. I think a more clear definition of the expectation and the communication, and the communication between the liaisons and the science collaboration would have helped in ensuring that that the information was arriving in an equal way to all science collaborations. Yes, Franz?
I'm pretty sure the liaisons got pretty specific feedback that they needed to inquire and get feedback from the science collaboration.
Yes.
And these reports were the way that happened.
Yep, but that's not the order in which things have happened, right? So the reports arrived first, and then the first report arrived first, and then we told the science collaborations that they were welcome to write new reports. And then I think the other piece is a bit of sort of peer pressure. Once one of the reports was out, the other science collaboration were concerned that their point would not be made as clearly or as strongly if it wasn't supported by a document. And I see.
So when did the schedule of discussions and deliberations go out to the community? So when has the community been updated about the discussion? So actual timelines of when the SCOC was meeting and discussing specific topics.
Yeah.
Has the schedule gone out since last year? Here's the questions we're going to talk about, but I'm saying actual specific timeline dates. So was ever a schedule put to the community? Because if it was or wasn't, that may have played a role in that.
That's another very fair point. So the schedule of the community at a very high level was first communicated through the liaisons to the science collaboration and then put in that document that I cannot click on, in that posting on community that I cannot click on, which at the top of my head was the beginning of May. Is that when we set that out? And that only has the benchmarks of the schedule, which is what we plan on doing for the PCW. So we plan on sharing our current thought and not a draft of the report, and that we plan on having a workshop, which now we have set dates for, and that's not on that post yet, and that our deliberations, our recommendations were still scheduled, and we were recommitting to sending them out in December. The inner schedule, partly certainly because of the switching of roles and me having to adapt to the working of the SCOC, has been in flux. But I had to say it is very hard to set a closer schedule for how we make our decisions, because we're working on a shifting landscape of metrics, we're working on a shifting landscape of recommendations, and we're working on a shifting landscape of information as well, about things that are possible or not possible with the observatory, and simulations that get ever increasingly more detailed and more accurate.
So I wonder if just keeping an eye on the time, I think one of the things that I'd like to make sure that we talk a little bit about is sort of what lies ahead, and sort of what happens after December 2022, and understanding sort of the scope of the SCOC efforts going there. And I don't know if that is what you have.
So of the 8 questions that I read earlier, which each one of them has sub-questions and more specific points, so I just read you through the overall topic. I think we're in quite good shape on 5 of them. The subcommittees have delivered recommendations that have been discussed by the entire committee. We're still working on Google Docs and comments, but there is definitely, there are directions for our recommendations. In some cases, those directions are that, again, we don't have enough information just yet, and we want some refinements of the option or something like that. The remaining 3 questions are a little bit more high level at this stage. 2 in particular are the early science and the targets of opportunity. For the target of opportunity, we're working with a lot of technical work is ongoing right now to see what can be enabled and how it can be enabled, and also who's going to help us building software for receiving alerts and selecting alerts, etc. We are thinking, let me not get into that. So there's a lot of technical work that is ongoing right now, which makes it very difficult for us to make a recommendation as of yet. Work is proceeding very rapidly. So by now, between now and December, we may have quite more concrete recommendations. But it also depends on how this work proceeds. And for the early science questions, we had already set off to give minimal input on early science. But these questions are intertwined with other questions that the committee is addressing, such as the TOs, the microsurvey, microsurvey, and the rolling cadence. And so we just need to land on those a little bit more clearly before we can address the early science question. What lies ahead, again, this is a standing committee of Rubin operations. We're looking at allowing about half of the committee to step down. They serve for 2 very long years. And we want to retain about half of the committee to retain institutional knowledge about how this work is done. For the members that will replace the existing member of the committee that are stepping down, this is my view of the priority in the selection that the SAC will have to make, which is ensuring that all science domain remains covered, ensuring that we have strong candidates to serve as liaisons, leveling the playing field so that all the science collaboration feel like they have a similar connection with the committee as the other science collaborations, and ensure that the prospective members are aware of the amount of work that is required of them and of the fact that this is, as all other committee more or less, it's unpaid work. And the questions that the committee will answer, I think, I can't really foresee in the full 2 years, but as they step in the first few months or a year of their work, the two pivotal things will happen. One is that this is the composition of the committee that will see the commissioning data, and we'll have to study very carefully the commissioning, what comes out of commissioning, and see whether that is consistent with the recommendations that we have made. The TOs will require more refinement, like I said, on the technical side. And so after 2022, a lot of decisions about how the TOs, the targets of opportunities, get selected and activated will have to be decided. And then the microsurveys, for which we're only planning right now of making recommendations about what really is necessary to be done in year 1 for microsurveys, which is surveys that take a very small fraction of Rubin time, and then a longer term plan for how one can solicit a microsurvey and how these are approved on the basis of which priorities will be a purview of the second group of committee members. Does that cover that?
And what year is that plan to be decided? So if I asked for a more detailed schedule, is there one in mind of when these decision benchmarks or milestones would be made? So does operations / the chair of the SCOC have a schedule in mind that they can show us, or quote a date for some things like the microsurveys? What would be the date that they would want to have, or the milestone within whatever the construction timeline to have that?
So I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but for the microsurvey, the current SCOC is planning to identify what microsurveys have to happen in year 1, or there will be a significant scientific loss for those surveys if they were delayed, and that will cover year 1 of operation. And in the course of year 1 of operations, as we see how much time with the system performing, how much time is actually available for microsurvey, etc. My hope is that the current composition of the committee will have a prioritized list of microsurveys, And so the job of selecting which one to turn on, so to speak, should not be too difficult.
So when will so I guess I'm asking for the next SCOC. What is the timeline for making those decisions, right? Within the commissioning milestones, right? So this is very general. So I'm asking for do you have a set, like, actual timeline that may slide for next year or for the next 2 years based on like those microservices?
Hey, Meg, this is Lynn Jones for those remote. I think that the answer is there that the timeline isn't set. A lot of the details of how the SCOC will operate during operations are a little bit fuzzy, and we should be starting to plan them.
I think that would actually. I don't mean operations, Lynn. I mean in the next 2 years. So I guess like when is the commissioning milestone, right? Of when you'd get the information you'd know to be able to make the decision, I guess, for the SCOC to be able to make their decision.
Yeah, so I think that that's not super well defined. Honestly, the commissioning, I think that you're going to have to wait until we see how the science verification surveys are going during commissioning, and that's really towards the end. Bob may have a different idea. I saw his hand up. Okay, so I really think like there's got to be the SCOC will come up with their recommendations that they hand over to operations at the end of this year. We work on early science in the next year and then keep track of what's happening with commissioning. And hopefully during commissioning, we'll see things earlier as soon as possible. Like I think that the SNAPS question is one that hopefully we'll be able to answer relatively early, and that will solidify a lot of other choices. And then I would envision that in the last 30 days of commissioning, as those science verification surveys are coming in, the SCOC says, okay, this is what we really think, and hopefully it'll be mostly just a rubber stamp with the addition of like what's going on with the SNAPs. And I don't see any way to make that earlier, and I think that that's kind of what has to happen. And then during operations, that is also something we should sort out how it's going to work, but it'll be somewhere around the 1 year mark when there's going to be, okay, we're coming up to the data release, it's time to reevaluate what's going on with the survey strategy. And whether that happens before or after data releases in each year, I think is something we need to think about. But honestly, I think it's really going to be as operations start, like that's going to be the final survey strategy. I will note that we do sign over the final recommendations we sign over now do essentially move the survey strategy plan into operations.
So, we're due for a break, but I do want to hear from Bob and from Will, and then I think we really will.
Michael, I have something as well.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think Stephen had his hand up first.
Bob, do you have something immediately in response to what we were just discussing?
Yeah, I'll just say that there's a loop to close between the operations team and the planning for early science, which we will have a big discussion on tomorrow with Leanne, and I will lead that session. And Lan's going to actually say a few words about it today. But basically what we're doing is laying out a set of scenarios that say if we are here at the end of commissioning, this is what it looks like. If we're somewhere else, this is what it looks like. And we're specifically going to fill out those scenarios that will allow us to connect to the SCOC under any one of those scenarios and then decide if this is where we're at in a year's time or going into operations, this is what we'll do. And if we're not, this case, we'll do this. And so that is the layout of the planning for early science at the highest level, and then we have to connect to the SCOC at the detailed level, depending on where we end up.
Okay. Will, I think you had your hands up before the others, so.
It's just a quick question about the immediate future, actually. Fed, can you comment, please, about the scope of the November workshop? About the scope of the November 22 workshop. I'm asking because there's a bit of a concern that how much the community can turn around between November and then December when the...
Yeah, so we talked a lot. I think we ran no less than 3 doodle polls to decide what was the optimal date for the workshop. But, it's an overly constrained issue. And eventually we opted for a later in the fall day to have more time between the PCW meeting and the session that we will run. that Lynn will show where we are right now, and the November workshop, so that the community can actually really work towards them, and hopefully in close contact with us. And then at the November workshop, so the November workshop this year will be different than the November workshop last year, right? So we're not going to be able to embrace new maths or new ideas for survey strategy and integrate them in the 1 month that is left into our recommendation. So really, that is our chance to understood some critical things. So my hope is that we can continue working closely with the community and with the science collaboration leading up to that. And then at that point, we can present based on all that information and all that input, what we plan to recommend, and if there is anything that is critically needs to be changed.
If I may comment, it sounds like anything identified that is critical and is missing should be announced by the community before the November workshop.
It should definitely,
So
of course, this should be a continuous exchange, which, is kind of the reason why we had the liaisons in the first one, right? So that we can keep working together as opposed to working separately and then meeting 3 times a year. Sure.
Okay, we have a question from Stephen online.
Hi. So, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned, Fed. I mean, the big question is not coming out here that we've raised before. I mean, you talk here about TOOs and micro surveys and early science.
Yeah.
The big question is getting in the first year, getting the whole sky in the can with all the filters. So maybe this is in too much detail, and you are discussing it within the SOC, and it's a big issue. But just what I'm hearing at the minute, there's lots of things here which, in the past, when they've come through the SAC, they haven't been that compelling. Microsurveys, for example, whenever we saw the white papers, they weren't very compelling. But getting the first year done and all the filters that enable so much science through DR1 and then difference imaging from then on, I'm not hearing that coming out as a big issue for the SOC. I thought that would be the red flag. I'm hearing smaller things from you.
I hear you. I think, there is a lot of groups and people that are working on early science. So that is a purview really of a larger group, not just the SCOC. And the SCOC will make some recommendations on that, but we're eager to hear about early science at the section at the PCW tomorrow. I'm going to say tomorrow. Right? And this is not just a scientific question, but it has technical overlap, and so we need to work closely with verification and construction team to get to that. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Lynn.
I just wanted to make one comment. It sounds like you're concerned about, will the survey actually start doing big survey operations? And that's definitely what's like the basis of this plan. The reason we're talking so much about these smaller aspects is because those are the things that those along with some characteristics of the big survey are what we're trying to optimize now. The basic plan is pretty much go start the survey, do what you can, but we have to figure out what's the best way to do that. And so that's why it sounds like we're talking about mostly small details.
We are essentially out of time. I do know Neil had wanted to sneak in with a question, and Neil, can you ask it quickly?
I'll try to keep it very brief. Federica, what is your assessment now of the fraction of valuable, well-considered cadence ideas that have actually been expressed as coded metrics? In my experience from the AGN science collaboration, this fraction is still rather small, and there's a lot of critical information still in English form in the white papers and the cadence notes and so on. And then, of course, if that fraction is small, what is the plan to ensure that a small fraction of coded metrics don't drive all the decisions?
Yep, that's really important point. I'm not going to tell you what fraction it is, because if I have it wrong,
would you say it's large or small?
I would say it has grown. I'm going to use the word exponentially. Probably slightly abusive.
Considerably.
It has grown considerably through a massive amount of work done by the community and by the observing strategy team. in the past year. I had some slides about some metrics that we have received on which there is no convergence yet, but a very large fraction of the metrics that constituted the white papers and the cadence notes now do exist as metrics. But you're right, and particularly what concerns me and keeps me up at night is that sort of that fraction is not even across science domains. And there are some groups of science areas, some scientists in science areas that have contributed more proactively to create the code.
Yeah. Okay, I think with that,
some groups are funded and other groups are not, and so that can lead to systematic biases.
There are many imbalances. There are many imbalances indeed.
Okay, we are behind schedule. This is a big topic, and again, there's special sessions on this topic or breakout sessions on it extensively, I think, through the week. So encourage everyone to engage with those. This is certainly something that the SAC will find itself discussing further. We'll take a break and reconvene at 10:55. Going to try to minimize the amount that we're slipping. That is what?
Steve.
Yeah, we had 15 minutes. It's 13 minutes that I'm giving us.
Steve, are you still there? I wanted to just add one piece of information to that question, if I can.
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. I'll get on Slack and I'll try and answer the questions. But Steve, if you're still here, I wanted to add that in the breakdown of the questions, several of them address what do we do in year one as well, such as the filter balance and the rolling cadence, so they interface with that question. No, you don't want the microphone.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. It's just, we don't want to be chasing our tails by year two.
Yeah, absolutely. And
get things in the can, you don't have them for that.
I feel like I feel like it interfaces so deeply with technical considerations about the system as built that it's very hard to answer it before we see commissioning and science verification, and it has to be answered closely together with the construction project. Thank you.
Yeah, and there'll probably be holes, but you want to do your best to cover most of the sky.
Right.
So you talked about the liaisons. Is that the same as the committee members?
Right.
They are the same as the committee members. They are, there's 8 liaisons, there's 8 science collaborations, and each one of them is a liaison. There's more committee members than science collaborations, so some of them have more than one liaison. The list is...
I thought that
Straw lensing is there, so it was on the other side. On the other side of the strong lensing.
Oh,
it should have been SLS.
Over there. Right.
Yeah, so Lynn is the link with and I'm representing ISSC, which is frankly really easy job because they have stayed away from input on this largely.
Okay. Yeah, that was confused.
Yeah.
Good. A lot of work going on.
It's a lot of work ongoing.
Back, everybody. Did we lost Franz? Has anyone seen Franz in the last short while? Presumably he will find his way back, but we're going to continue in this whirlwind tour through all different aspects of Rubin and the things that the SAC has been thinking about. The next thing is community brokers. This is the event brokers that the SAC reviewed proposals for these, and Leanne, as soon as she is ready, is going to lead that discussion. Did anyone find Franz? Yes. No coffee after all that? Okay. Okay. They assured me there would be coffee. Yes. Yes.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Can remote people hear me? I take my mask off since I'm standing near anyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you well.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the status of community brokers. Eric Belm put these slides together. He's the alert production lead. I'm the data management scientist. We're just going to give you a quick status of where we're at. So as I think most of you know, Rubin has agreed to send the full alert stream to 7 brokers. We had a process last year whereby data manager worked with the SAC to assess the proposals that we received from 9 broker teams. We decided to accept them all. There you go. We decided to accept them all. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 7 here who are full stream brokers. These are full stream general purpose brokers who will receive the stream from LSST. In addition, there are 2 brokers who will operate downstream of one of these main brokers. SNAPS is very specifically focused around solar system objects. They're working already with Antares. They have a good collaboration with Antares. And POI variables is more oriented around variables and variable stars. I think they've also begun to speak with Antares, and they will work as a downstream broker. So although they're not receiving the full stream, we still consider them part of our broker ecosystem and an important part of our science, the project. We are in the process of drafting a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, for the broker teams. It's important that we codify in some way how the project will work with the broker teams, how the brokers will work with us. It's pretty lightweight at the moment. It will start out that way. Its main goal is to clarify the terms and the expectations of what being a broker is and what the project is. So what sort of support do we provide to the brokers? What do we give them in terms of alerts? And what do we expect from the brokers in turn in terms of the quality of service that they provide?
Question, if I may.
Yep.
Sorry to jump in. A single MOU for all 7 of them, or? Yep.
No. MOU per broker.
Per broker. Okay.
So, you know, if one of the brokers decided they wanted out, they decided they changed their mind, we discussed that, we end the MOU, and then it affects nobody else. Mm-hmm. So we will discuss and sign our MOU with all the broker teams. Just a few points that initially we will have a 2-year term of collaboration between each broker team. And then after the start of operations, we'll have annual reviews of the system, and we'll continue to revise this. So it's fairly open at the moment, fairly lightweight, and it will evolve over time. I'm happy. I'd like this to be discussion based. If anyone wants to ask any questions on that, I can pause here.
Mm-hmm. So are the teams themselves part of the drafting process, or are they waiting for you to give a first draft?
For us to get this out. We're happy to take feedback from them. Mm-hmm. We'll listen to what they say. If they say, "Oh, okay, you include something else, we don't like that."
And they know this is underway. This is.
They know this is coming. They know it's underway.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. I think they're waiting for it actually, for us to put something more formal in place.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask when the aim for this to be signed, agreed to? Because I mean, in my head, I'm like, sometime 2020, mid 2024. We're 2 years away. So when is that understanding going to get finalized? Is this something you're thinking of like by the end of this year and the next month, right? Like when is, I guess, do you think you'll have a final version of this document that people will, do you think everyone will be happy with and sign?
Yeah, I might let Bob comment on that as well, but I'm thinking pretty soon in the next few months. I mean,
I would just add that, this is Bob, I would just add that I don't think this is slowing any broker team down with any part of their development. So I think it's important to get done, but I think the commissioning of the alert systems is going to happen somewhat later in the phase of commissioning, and we need to be leading up to that. We just need to have the teams in good technical communication. A lot of the teams are already brokering things at a large scale and continuing to work, so I don't see this as a big concern.
I guess I would just say is that this formalizes things, right? This is the getting the lawyers document, and so things don't really happen until MOUs are signed, right? And so on the community side, right, for us, this is, I think, more important to make sure it's actually happening so that everyone is clear about what they're getting. So maybe it's not necessarily stopping production, but it may stop that, what happens if people don't understand what is being accepted and received or being built. And so I do think it's still important to make sure it happens as soon as it can happen for that reason.
Yeah, I just think it may also be important for some people's funding, right? If they actually have a signed MOU, so that may be a motivator.
Okay, so we have some basic alert distribution infrastructure. It has been installed and was tested in use previously at NCSA. We are migrating away from NCSA as the US data facility and towards SLAC. I think most people know this. The alert production team has built and tested this alert distribution infrastructure. It's based on a Kafka broker, a schema registry, an alert archive, and there's an authentication system built into it as well. You can find all the details of this in DMTN 210, which is the implementation of the alert distribution system. We are currently still in the process of migrating all of our systems from NCSA to the USDF at SLAC, and we need to make a few minor modifications to the alert distribution system for it to run at SLAC. So once this migration is complete, which in principle should be in this month in August, we will start to work on setting up the alert distribution system at SLAC for brokers to start working with. Back in January, we conducted some connection tests with the broker teams via the interim data facility. This is a cloud-based interim data facility that's being used for Data Preview 0. We made use of cached alerts that had been generated by the science pipelines and were loaded into a production-like Kafka instance. 5 of the full-stream brokers, that I mentioned previously, 5 of the full-stream brokers I mentioned previously successfully authenticated and transferred data. 2 of the teams were unavailable at the time for these tests, but that's okay. We're going to have many more of these tests set up, and they can join in later. So as I just said, we expect to be conducting more of these tests once we're all set up and running at the USDF. Brokers, however, are not idle just because we're not providing them with some alerts at the moment to work with. They are very active in performing classification tests using the Elastic alerts. This is part of the Elastic Data Challenge. And this year, 50 million simulated LSST alerts will be transmitted to brokers for classification in this context. And as I just mentioned, we're not ready with our alert distribution infrastructure yet. This Elastic Challenge is making use of the existing ZTF alert distribution system, but eventually we will be able to set up our system for people to test and work with. And one final point here, we are currently in discussion with the Antares alert broker. It's also an NSF-funded project for the alert filtering service. We have a tech note here, which you can have a look at the details of. We've just finished putting this in place. The LSST science requirements document recognized that we needed to be able to support both user and predefined alert filters. These would be running at the site to filter on sort of predefined, a certain set of predefined or user-defined well-known science criteria or well-known filters. The Rubin alert filtering service was put in place both to support these user and predefined alert filters, but also as a stopgap in case no community brokers became available. This was written back in 2012, 2014, and we really didn't know if we would have any community alert brokers at all. This is now clearly not the case because we have 9 operational alert brokers, all of which are running in some form or another on ZTF and demonstrating that they can process LSST-like alerts from precursor surveys. So we're no longer concerned about this. So rather than building an alert filtering service ourselves, we are proposing to partner with Antares, who already have a user alert filtering service, appears to meet Rubin's requirements, and operates as part of Noir Lab along with the Rubin operations project. So we're proposing to partner with them to deliver these user and predefined alert filter capabilities that have been promised by LSST.
So sorry, I have a bunch of questions, if I may. So this is new.
Yes, it is.
Is what you're suggesting here to be distinct from what the Antares broker does as a community broker, or is this integrated into what? So Antares is one of the community brokers, and the vision that had been that they're what you're calling the AFS was its own separate thing. So will Antares be have sort of two modes, or is this now part of what Antares is doing full stop, or how should we think about that?
I think, is Adam in the room? I did see Adam before.
Yeah.
This is sort of a technical implementation detail, I think, really about that. Adam, could you respond to that?
Yeah, and you're going to have to come up to a microphone. Yeah.
So I think that's, by the way, this is Adam Bolton. I'm the director of the Community Science and Data Center at NORLab, which includes, among other things, the Antares project. I think probably right now we're just at the level of assessing that the features and performance of Antares meet the requirements that are laid out in the project requirements for LSST. Whether this would be a service provided by Antares or a separate deployment or something that runs along with the Rubin alert production, I think all of those technical implementation things are still probably to be determined. This is really, at least as I understand it now, just identifying that these requirements, excuse me, that the previous requirements are met by the Antares system.
One thing I'll add is that as this is something that Rubin has promised to its community in our science requirements document, if we do partner with Antares to deliver this Rubin service, it would need to be available to all our data rights holders.
That was going to be my next question. Exactly. Yeah. So
it wouldn't be for Antares to decide who could or couldn't access.
Absolutely.
They would have to meet also the Rubin data rights requirements document specifications.
And when you say funding, when you say partnering, what does that mean in terms of funding? Is Rubin providing funds to Antares?
That's a Bob question.
I think it's to be determined if there's any part of this scope in the construction project that needs to be funded by partnering with another. I mean, this is the kind of thing a construction project does all the time, right? We have all sorts of partnerships and contracts to get things delivered, to deliver on the construction project. That's really what this is right now. I think you should think of it as we had something that we said we would build. We have to build it. We're looking at it. The most efficient way to do that is simply adopt a set of capabilities from Antares to show that we meet those requirements. I think it's too premature to say whether or not Antares as built could do those, or if there's something extra that needs to be done. And then we would have the discussion about actual funding if anything was needed. I think this is something that people should not think too hard about, right? We're not really changing anything about the alerts or how they're brokered or how anyone connects to the different brokers. This is really tying off a construction project deliverable without making the construction project repeat work that's essentially already done or can be done simply because they already have enough on their plate.
We have a question on blue jeans from Mansi.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, Bob, I had a similar question. It is not just a question of whether the capability exists externally, but whether there's a guarantee this will work for the 10 years of operations, right? Because for each of the community brokers, there is some uncertainty. They're at the mercy of funding agencies, whether they get funded or not. For the Rubin duration, I mean, all of them are optimistic, but there is an uncertainty on funding for them, since the funding doesn't come from the project, but comes from applications to NSF, NASA, etc. But in the case of the Rubin alert filtering system, that was supposed to be sort of like a minimal service with not too many bells and whistles, but sort of a minimal thing that the project delivers to the community so that science can happen without any dependence on more ambitious plans and funding for various event brokers. So I'm a bit concerned that sort of this very minimal bare bones plan for science to happen is now getting sort of intertwined with an event broker, a community broker.
Well, so I think you should think of it more in terms of there was always going to be an alert filtering system. It was always going to be the responsibility of Rubin operations to run it to the extent that it's needed throughout the 10 years to cover for anything the alert brokers don't do, and that's still the case. So we will have an alert filtering service. In this case, it's being proposed to be delivered by Antares, and we'll have to run it as an operations team. And we're funded by NSF and DOE to do that.
Right, so it should be guaranteed and funded. I mean, the service for the 10 years of Rubin operation.
It's as guaranteed as any other thing we've said we do in the operations plan for 10 years, and we get funding every year.
Right.
Okay. Well, Leanne, you want to go on?
Yep, that's it.
Oh.
That's it.
Okay.
You wanted a quick update. You gave me 15 minutes to talk about where we're at with alert brokers, and I am on time.
Actually, for what's worth, we gave you half an hour. But yes, indeed. That's what I wrote down. But that's okay. We don't have to go out of our way to fill time. But we have time for further discussion.
Slides, but if anyone would like
Okay.
to ask more questions
So
about
I'd love.
alert brokers, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can move on to early science.
Yeah, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about sort of how when we reviewed the proposals for the event brokers, there was much discussion of being able to scale up to size and various other things. And I don't know, I'd be interested to hear if there's sort of ongoing discussions with the various event brokers about how they're making progress and sort of understanding. I mean, you did describe that the test that you had done, which is great. And so it all went well. That is, are there lessons learned that came out of that, or there?
You're talking about having the brokers be ready to handle the
Right.
barrage, the
Exactly.
type of LSST alerts that's going to
Exactly.
Yeah, so this is the first sort of real test that we did. This one here in January, we conducted a connection test. We basically just got this alert distribution system in place not very long. It was running at NCSA. It's Kafka based, as I mentioned, and these tests were very successful. And everyone who was able to connect, the 5 teams who were available, they successfully authenticated, they successfully transferred all the data. Now, clearly, it's a long way from the hose pipe of alerts we're going to get with LSST, but this was our sort of first set of successful tests. And once we get set up at the USDF, we're going to start to pick this up again to build up more testing with the alert distribution system. Maybe I'll just say one more thing before I invite any of the alert brokers in the room who might have participated in this to answer, is that the brokers, all of these brokers, are very active with our precursor surveys. ZTF is a very good precursor for LSST, and they're all working, as far as I know, with the ZTF alerts, and they're all participating. Not all of them maybe, but several of the teams are participating in this elastic challenge of 50 million simulated LSST alerts. So this is very encouraging, and we'll be following this and tracking the progress with this and trying to understand if there are any issues. So at the moment, we're only really starting. We're starting to ramp up. So far, so good. And we definitely have a plan to continue through the next few years to ramp up our alert distribution system and work very closely with the brokers so that they're ready for year one. But I might invite if there's anyone in the room who is from a broker team who might want to comment on how well the LSST challenge went back in January.
Or anyone on Zoom, for that matter. On BlueJeans, excuse me.
There is a question on BlueJeans from Meg.
I wanted to ask about the various types of alerts, because Elastic has no solar system. And I know some brokers will handle it, some don't, right? But how or when, I guess, is that thought about really simulating an alert stream that has both? Because ZTF is pretty poor at being an example for solar system alerts because there's not much information in there. So I was just wondering when do you envision being able to test that for brokers that are going to be parsing them, or at least being able to identify one from the other, et cetera, where plastic is basically just the astrophysical side?
Yeah, we're well aware that that plastic and ZTF don't cover solar system and don't cover all forms of science as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I can give you a date on when we will have anything specific to solar system, but just simply to say that we recognize that all science domains, all science drivers that are part of our ecosystem are very important, and we will ensure that they're all ready over the course of the next couple of years as we work up to operations. I'm not sure I can add any more to that timeline.
Okay, question here. Yeah, do you want to come up, find a mic somewhere?
Hi, this is Gautam Narayan. I'm one of the developers on Antares. I started working with that as a postdoc, and I'm also the PI of the Elastic project. I just wanted to clarify that Elastic is not created by Rubin. It's created by one of the science collaborations, the Dark Energy Science Collaboration in this case. And yes, it doesn't include solar system objects, but Meg, of course, we're happy to also work with you folks, or if you want to borrow infrastructure, for example, taking the OpSIMs and putting in objects using the SSI tools in the DM stack, that's entirely possible. So if the Solar System Science Collaboration can get that effort up and running, then we can also help translate objects into alerts to feed them into ZADs the same way as we do for any of the other transient variable science sources. It's just a question of having the impetus on the sides of the science collaboration itself.
I'll just comment sorry, Meg, you and I may be about to say the same thing. This is a huge amount of work. Any of these things, a lot has been done, and there's the challenge of finding people to do all that work with. Yes, sorry, Meg, you were going to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that, and also the funding to pay those people to do that work. So it's not clear to me that this is something the community should be doing, or Rubin should be doing, to ensure that when they, with their data structures for solar system schema, that the brokers can handle it. So yeah, I think if we had, a postdoc worth of funding for solar system science collaboration, we would think about it, but we don't have that at the moment. So I think it's a thing to think about of when does Rubin need to ensure that that is successfully being parsed and processed by brokers down the line.
Maybe I'll just add one more thing as well. I know that I don't know too much about the SNAPS broker, but I do know it's a solar system focused broker. They're working with Antares. I don't know, Adam, do you know much about the work they're doing with existing surveys?
I know very little about I know very little about what SNAPS is doing. There's very little
Adam,
that's publicly available about SNAPS.
All right. So maybe that would be. I don't think there's anyone from the SNAPS broker in the room, but maybe that would be an avenue to follow up on, Meg, to find out how SNAPS are working with Antares.
We have tried.
Oh, have you? Okay,
that's there's not very little. We were told that they're making progress, but there's very little that's publicly available. So it's not. I think there's a question of where they're at, like in capability versus what people can see, and so we know what they will want to do, but I've never seen a prototype or a website that I could go to. So, so I don't think we really know what the status is right now, other than they keep telling us that they're progressing.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we go on?
Yeah, just one more comment.
Yep.
I think, Meg, you said just a minute ago that it wasn't for the project, I think, to make sure the brokers were able to handle solar system alerts, but I think one thing we do need to make sure is that in our test alert streams, we have alerts that contain solar system information such that the brokers can commission. And that is on our side.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if there's no further comments at this point on on event brokers, Leanne is going to switch hats and go on to talk about early science.
Switch my hat while I have a drink.
There we go. Excellent. Okay.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about early science. These are some slides put together by myself, Bob, and Phil. I have only got 15 minutes in this session to talk about early science.
That's what we said.
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
But we do have a full session on early science tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon, so please come along. I'm just going to skim through. This is the exact same slide deck, but I'm just going to skim through a few of the slides here and a few points. But maybe I'd rather, given that Fed talked about this a little bit before, the relationship with the SCOC, I might just sort of open up the floor to ask, what do you want to know? And we can make sure that we're at least prepared to answer it. If we can't answer it today, we can certainly answer. We can try to answer it tomorrow. I'll go through that. Okay, so there seems to have been quite a bit of confusion around what is early science. All right, one of the things I did for this session was to solicit questions in advance through a form. Mm-hmm. One of the questions was, what is early science? I mean, we keep getting confused about this. So to be clear, it is defined as any science enabled by Rubin for its community through and including the first data release 1. So that means it's data preview 1, data preview 2. Data preview 1 is based on ComCam data. We're expecting that in, that's a typo. Yeah, complete typo, I'm sorry. That's March 23 to July 24 time region. Data preview 2, which will be based on LSST cam data. This is the December 2024 to March 2025 is the expected delivery for that. And then data release 1, which will be based on 6 months, the first 6 months of data with LSST, released 1 year after we start the survey and is expected for around October 25 to January 26. And in addition to these 3 data previews and releases, there will be alerts at some scale, some reduced scale, reduced facility, which will be facilitated by commissioning templates and incremental template generation in Alert 1. And I just want to be clear about this, that it will be at reduced scale and fidelity. So in year 1, we will not have the templates that we need to do alert generation across the whole sky. Bob?
Just to be very clear, because there's a typo there and then I misspoke. It's March of 24 to July of 24. In that first bullet was when we expect. That's the range of dates where we currently expect to have ComCam data released to the community in a data preview.
I'll correct the slides and re-upload them. Sorry about that.
And you may want to comment on the range. So the first date is the best case scenario if construction sticks to its current forecast. But then there is uncertainty and...
Yeah, we have uncertainty.
Sorry, Dennis, just to clarify it, are these dates when the data is released or when the data is collected?
No, this is when this would be when we would make the data release.
Right, but the data is collected N months before, right?
Yes.
Yes, this is about 6 months after the end of data collection.
Okay.
So that's definition of early science. Please feel free to reuse that slide or definition as you like. We have put together a tech note, which is called the Roadmap for Early Science. It's RTN 11. We have uploaded to Zenodo and to the archive. You can cite it here. We produce this as a citable document so that people have something to refer to when making proposals. Basically, this is the guiding document for all early science with Rubin. It's currently in its first version. We're going to update it after this workshop and take into account the feedback we received this week. It will continue to evolve over the whole pre-operations period. It will provide the plans for the early science program. It will outline the strategy for obtaining observations during commissioning to enhance early science. So that means that where commissioning is agnostic to pointing and filter, we will work with commissioning to point at a certain region of the sky and to use filters that would enhance our opportunities for early science. It also describes the plans to implement incremental template generation in year 1. This means that we will produce templates as we collect enough images in a given filter for a given pointing, and then we will use those templates to generate alerts throughout year 1. In the the original plan, templates are produced as part of data release production. So that means they're produced every year in a data release. So in the baseline plan, we wouldn't have any templates with which to make alerts until the second year of operations. And this means that there would be no alert production in year 1. So in order to improve upon this, we will use we'll use images gathered during commissioning to build templates to use in year 1. And during year 1, we will make templates at some cadence, still to be determined, as we get enough images to make templates for a given filter and region on the sky. So this will increase the number of alerts we get early on in the survey. I won't go through that. Bob, do you want to speak to this one? You're down to do this.
Sure. So this goes to what we were discussing briefly earlier during the SCOC session here this morning. And what I was saying was, when we have the early science plans fully fleshed out, because of the uncertainty in commissioning and what might happen, and the fact that we have a finite amount of time left to do and a certain amount of work to do, and whether or not those fit, you can imagine that things might get squeezed. And parts of the things that might get squeezed are how much time we have on Sky commissioning either ComCam or LSST-CAM. So what we have started setting up is a framework to discuss a few set of scenarios and what that would mean. Each of those scenarios is connected to kind of a view of how you come out of the final commissioning and science validation and go into full operations. All of these assume that the construction project can't finish unless they deliver the system that meets all its specifications, that the agencies pass off on it, that we all know every part of the system can do what it's supposed to do and take science quality data and deliver it to the community. That's a lot different than we will have done the best commissioning job we could ever do and have and filled out. I salute your confidence, my friend, and I'm with you. And filled out, 2 months of just solid survey-like observing. That's the ideal case, right? That's what's currently in our plan. When we're done with all the hard work of integrating and testing the system, we end up on Sky and we're just clicking through the night, taking data like we would in a survey. That's currently plan A. And a lot of what we've been talking about in the community over the last years has to do with how to go into operations on plan A. Well, we're about 2 years out right now, and we know we still have a lot of challenges left, so we might not end up in plan A. We might end up having finished commissioning and taking some really good science data, but maybe we didn't finish the science validation surveys. So then what do? That's plan B. So that means there might be some more things to do in the first part of operations to take care of getting ready to know exactly how we want to run on the Sky. It might mean trying to ensure that there's data delivered to the community in the first few months so that they don't have to wait a whole year for data release 1. Maybe we get super squeezed. No one wants to go there, but this is scenario C. Maybe we get super squeezed in finishing commissioning. We show that the system works. We know it works the way it's supposed to, but we haven't had the time to work on Sky, to run as an operations team, to confidently start out on the cadence and start working toward DR1. What happens then? That means we might have more of that kind of getting the team ready, knowing how to work night to night, how all the processing works. That might take a little bit more time in year 1, and then that might push out what we view as the first thing we give to the community that would be analogous to DP2, and then how that affects, the timing of DR1. So that's the framework. Now what we want to do as we go forward is try and flesh out the details of what each one of those 3 things means and how we could logically attach the data previews and first data release and what we're doing on Sky to what the community wants to see. And then what I mentioned this morning, a real important detail would be looking at each of those scenarios when you get it flushed out and then go back to the SCOC and what does that mean for the initial survey if we start in one of these different scenarios. So that's what this is all about, and that's the starting point of the framework, and then working with you and forward in the next year or so and with the SCOC as they do their work is where we want to get to. And so the SCOC's work largely has been based on, to the extent that they've factored in early science, has largely been based on scenario A at this point.
So I'm a little confused, Bob, because to me, it's all plan A, right? If you still have commissioning to do, you do your commissioning tests, you run the scheduler because you want to make sure your system runs. And so when the telescope crashes because it lost guiding, you put a fault report in, you go try to fix it that night. Once it's back guiding, you restart the scheduler and continue to take images. And maybe that night turns out to be that 20% of that data is useful, but you learned how to operate the system. And so I'm a little confused how you need a special survey or in Plan C to shake down operations when you'd want to actually be running your operations procedure, right? And that maybe it would be rephrasing to the community that we're going to run, but sometimes there's going to be faults. Sometimes that data may not be as useful, right? And we will make sure that the scheduler is aware that the data quality in whatever image wasn't great because the focus went out, and we're still figuring out why the focus went out with some temperature or some strut that's not being measured correctly or in the right place or whatever. And so I guess I'm a little confused why we're going down a direction of having possibly these other surveys rather than changing the expectation to the community, right? Because then you're actually practicing operations. Where if you're doing a different survey for 3 to 6 months, you're not actually practicing what will be the ultimate operations. So can you explain a little bit of that thinking?
I think it just comes down to, we don't know how any of the regular observing will go yet, and we don't know how far along we'll be at the end of the commissioning period, and it's finite. And there's only a finite amount of time that we can work before we have to decide that we're going into full operations. All I'm saying is there may be work to do at night in scenario C, in the first part of year one, that isn't just, okay, let's hit the button on the scheduler again. We just aren't there yet. Depending on how much we learn and train and understand the system as we go forward, how efficient we are in covering the sky. We don't know that yet. That's the goal of Plan A. That's the goal of Chuck's very detailed system integration, test, and commissioning plan that has all those phases worked out so that by the time you end, you're essentially doing the survey. All I'm saying is there are scenarios where you don't get that far, and we have to somehow capture that knowledge in the first part of operations.
There was
yeah, go ahead. I'll let everyone else talk.
Yeah,
I was gonna,
but
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so but I think Mac has a point, right? I mean, you have to go and debug the system, and once you're done, you're done. And of course, yeah, and I get that you might end up earlier than you thought you will, or it might take much longer, but it doesn't change the actual process. You just go and debug it recursively until it works. So why do we actually need plans A, B, and C?
Because Ange and Meg, mathematically, it's a different benefit function when you do regular main survey, as opposed to saying, I want to minimize the time where every single field will have at least, say, 5 visits in each of the bands. You get a different behavior of the scheduler.
So I was going to ask a different question, if I might, which is, at one point when we were talking about early science, we were thinking optimistically in terms of Plan A, but imagining variations on what the full 10-year cadence plans will be in the first 6 months to optimize science there. So as it were, focusing on deep drilling fields so we can learn a lot about cadence and see just how deep we can go. Things that would not necessarily have happened during science verification. You can imagine interesting scientific papers being written right away. The way it sometimes got phrased was the NSF and DOE would really love to see some high-profile papers out early, and this is let's see what we can do, and that's a fine goal, but of course that will torque decisions that are made for the remaining 9.5 years, as it were, and that's a statement independent or assuming that we're in Plan A scenario. At least as I remember hearing these discussions before that happened. I'm sorry, Francis, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to answer to your.
Are you going to go in a different direction, or you respond? Yes. Okay. Let's see if we can get a response to that first, and then Francis can speak. Am I misremembering those discussions from some time ago, or?
I guess what I would say is that
we can't hear the response.
Yeah.
That is the type of thing that we were talking about would close the loop between this broad framework of early science planning and the details that the SCOC is doing.
Okay, so that is, you're saying that this is the SCOC's purview specifically.
They're the ones that could tell that could actually answer the question you just asked. Like if we did this deep drilling field now, you know, how would that help us understand, or what would the impact be on the survey going forward? I think the reason we would do it now is so, like you said, we would learn something about how this goes forward, and we would you know, have more efficient, productive observations going forward. But the main point I think that you're making is if you make choices in the first year, how does that impact the survey? We need the SCOC or the survey scheduling team to tell us what that means.
Yes, I think you need all of us, and we all need each other, right? So the SCOC has the purview of evaluating scientifically how the choice of one deep drilling fields or the choice of pursuing a deep drilling fields over something else can overall maximize the scientific throughput of the survey. And the scheduling team will tell you what it does for the scheduler, and we will discuss together what are the pros and cons and what is the optimal choice.
Yeah. And I think just before Franz jumps in, you know, deciding to do something like one of the deep drilling fields for scientific reasons that's consistent with what the SCOC is doing with the overall survey, and that we can do it, the scheduling team knows we can do it. Doing it early is a great thing because we could presumably think about releasing, maybe as a part of a data preview 2 or something, that data set earlier, and people would have it to work while we accumulate data on wide, fast, deep and go toward DR1.
Okay, Franz, do you want to?
Okay, so well, this is kind of related to what ended up being the discussion, but my understanding is there are not really any options that are directed towards optimizing early science, and I guess we need to understand the plan so that we can implement them, so that then we can evaluate them, because right now we're doing things based on a 10-year plan, and many of the science cases we're going to be, you know, potentially crippled by 10%. Due to the fact that there aren't alerts generated in the first year, for instance, if that ends up being the case. And so that input will factor into some of the decisions we need to make. I'm not sure where all this goes, but it's under the purview of SCOC that we need to think about it. On the other hand, there are science verification and commissioning tasks, which I think need, you need to assess what the ultimate depth is. You need, there are things that I think you have in there that we have to do this, we have to figure out a field to do it on. And that can help the first year of science. But, those are things that really, I think you have to do it. And then there's extra stuff that, it would be nice if we could do it. And articulating that, it would be useful, I think.
So I think that'll be a big part of the topic in the discussion we can have tomorrow. But I think the main point is, yes, we realize that we need to actually have a real strategy for how we're going to, for example, deploy the incremental template generation and make the trade-offs between filters and area on sky to do that as efficiently or as optimally based on the science that people want to do to get as much of that carved out in year one. That has to be part of the early science plan. It has to be done in cooperation with SCOC. And then how it looks differently in any one of these scenarios has to be looked at. That's I think where we're trying to go.
Dave, do we have anyone else on?
Meg has her hand up.
So I want to stress a couple things. Even if the SCOC is making a decision on this, how the community give input on this is unclear, right? Because this is different than here's a bunch of metrics we have. We'd like you to, here's how you can evaluate what we think is important for cadence. Because this is different, and it's going to matter because, say I want a large program on Gemini. Well, if you're going to do a 3 to 6 month survey, that's a different observing semester. And so if I apply, right, and get a large and long program for 2 or 3 years on Gemini or VLT or another telescope on ESO, and then this decision happens, right, it could mean that I have a semester that now is useless because the science isn't being done. And so I think it needs to be very clear when decisions about this will happen, right? When the community is going to know what the SCOC thinks, what operations is thinking, where's the latest status, because it's next year and the year after that we're putting in these proposals, right? These big, large proposals, or even smaller observing proposals. And so it's 2 months before that it's going to be announced that actually we're going to go with Plan C or Plan B, and we're going to do this 6-month survey doing something else, like observing a deep drilling field. Well, if you do one that has nothing for solar system, all my proposals, right, need to get shifted to a different semester. And so I think figuring out timelines of as best as possible. I understand things shift with, anything that's any kind of project that's being finished, but really on where are the points where decisions are going to be made, and how is operations and the SCOC asking for this feedback? Because right now I don't know how a science collaboration gives the feedback other than writing their own document. And I think as we saw from the SCOC process,
Meg,
just again to highlight the current timeline
Meg,
as best as possible.
these are good points, and as you know, we've been discussing them at the SCOC for years now. So the plan for the next calendar year, 23, and that will be before we have any real data from ComCam or the LSST cam, the plan is to assume that everything will work as designed, and SCOC will make early science recommendations based on that assumption. And then by the end of calendar year 23, we will know more about how the system is performing. And then, if need be, if the system is very different from what we assumed we would have, then we still have time in 24 to modify the original plan. But earlier than 24, we cannot simply decide between A, B, C, because we will not know how the system is behaving. So we do understand that people are putting in proposals for major observing programs, but we cannot tell you anything more precisely until we have our own data and estimates of the system performance.
Well, our lab could guarantee that if somebody puts a large and long program in, that they'd be willing to shift the semesters rather than them losing it. And that's a guarantee that could go through, given this is a lab facility. So example, I think having those communications and clarity would be really helpful for the community, because if we knew if we put a proposal and this happens in June, and the operations is going to start in October, for example, and that automatically your large and long proposals or other proposals would shift in semester, right? That might help the community to make sure that we're not, flooding with proposals, right, multiple times, or spending the energy to continually write. And so that's something to think about. So I think somewhere that this timelines can be published would be helpful in places, right? So I know there's a broad SCOC timeline, but I don't think there's one that's clear to necessarily the community on those broad strokes. Like you mentioned, as it's going to take till January 24 to really understand the system.
So I think clearly just managing expectations.
Yeah, well, managing, sorry, you didn't have the microphone on, so I'll just repeat, managing expectations here will be important, and giving people idea of what to expect. Again, we're running behind time despite, so.
This is just a few of the slides that I pulled out that we're going to be presenting tomorrow. I thought this would be of most interest to the SCOC to discuss.
Good.
I don't have anything else that I wanted to present today. I really wanted us to get to this point to present these scenarios and discuss where we're at.
Okay.
But there will be a much bigger discussion tomorrow.
Okay, good. So we look forward to that tomorrow. I would like to go on. There's, as we see, each of these topics leads to all kinds of interesting questions that come up. We realize just how interconnected and complex many of these issues come. But I think what we want to do now is go on to Bob and Phil, who are going to tell us about the process by which international partners, in-kind contributors are being brought into the project. And I, for one, have been a little unclear on where that process stands, and that's what I'm hoping we can learn something about. So.
Sure. So I'll say a few words and then let Phil revise and amend anything I don't get right, or he will certainly have more details. Phil has been leading.
You have no slides, right?
No, we have no slides.
Okay.
Phil has been leading much of the development of the in-kind program. So where are we as a status? We have now over the last 2 years taken in proposals for in-kind contributions to the Rubin Science Enterprise to enhance, resources available basically to our science community, and also a few contributions to help with actual operations activities. We have taken in something like 43 programs, which consist of multiple contributions per programs. There's not a set amount, but there are about 153 contributions. So the vast bulk of those we have looked at in detail. Our contribution evaluation committee, a science-based, community-based committee, looked them over and made recommendations. We then worked with the proposing teams to adapt those recommendations. In some cases it was, this is great, just do it. In other cases it was, this is good, but fix this, that, or the other thing. We went through that process with those programs. We presented a full slate of these contributions to both the agencies, NSF and DOE, for their information and just so they knew what we were looking at. And then with our management board, which consists of leadership from SLAC and Noir Lab, we got approval to go ahead and implement these contributions. There were a small handful that were delayed from the contributor side from the first round that have now come in and been reviewed. That was something like 8 or 10 contributions. Those have also gone through the CEC, and we have already presented them as, from the Rubin side, as recommending to our management board again that they accept these, and I believe they will. They haven't done that. We'll work with them. Our next management board meeting is in, I think, the week after this meeting. And then what remains is to take each one of those contributions, program by program, so all the institutions. By the way, that represents 30 countries. The 43 programs is from 30 countries. And then sign off on each side with a data rights agreement, which will basically show the statement of work, what is being contributed, and then the valuation of how many data rights holders each of those institutions receives for how long. In most cases, it's just the full survey. And that is what is the thing that Phil and I are spending most of our time right now, is working with, for lack of a better way to put it, the legal teams at both Aura and SLAC to understand the terms and conditions for these agreements and to make them the same. So one thing that we learned early on was that we weren't going to be able to do trilateral agreements like contributor A with SLAC and Aura all signing. So what we've done is we've split up the contributions so that they're most aligned with either SLAC or Aura, and then we envision a bilateral agreement with Aura and a contributor, or SLAC and a contributor, for example. And that's what we're working on right now, but we want to make sure that the different agreements that SLAC develops and that Aura develops have the same basic terms and conditions, so that there's basic fairness and that everyone understands what they're agreeing to. And there's actually cases where a certain program might have an Aura agreement and it might have a SLAC agreement. So that's currently where we're at. I remain hopeful that we will have these. We are working with a very detailed draft right now on the Aura side, which the SLAC folks have seen, and I think they think it looks similar to things they've done in the past. I'm hopeful that within months we will have these available that we can ship to the contributors. And then we will start the final round of discussing those with them, and then everyone signing off, and then we'll be off. And then I'll leave it to Phil to tell you about where we are in the regular cycle of things that are happening between us and these contributing teams, which, after all, have actually started doing some things at their own risk, to be clear, before we had the final agreements signed off.
Before we get there, I wonder if I can just ask the question. So these went to the management team, then went to NSF and DOE. Were there any cases at which the NSF and DOE balked or had additional comments or wanted to iterate further or said, give us more time or anything like that? or was it all straightforward?
So I should say that there was interest for contributions from many places originally. Goes back to 2019.
Yes.
And we solicited letters of interest from anyone that wanted to contribute a letter of interest saying, we're a group here and we want to do this, and we would like to do that to join the Rubin Science Enterprise and have data rights. Of all those letters of interest, that's what NSF and DOE told us. They would look at them and say, yes, go ahead and further develop these ideas. And there were several that are still under consideration and have not been approved to go forward for further development.
At the letter of interest.
At the letter of interest level. Yeah. And then beyond that, when we actually so after that, working on things that everyone thought were good ideas, the CEC has certainly given us a range of recommendations about the value of certain things and whether or not to accept them or not. And we did have some that we did not accept, not very many. And we certainly had somewhat more that were the CEC said, this is good, but you need to do X differently or add to it or that kind of thing. And so we've been working with the programs to capture those things and improve the contributions.
There's a question from Josh online if the list of approved contributions is available somewhere, or if you could provide that.
So we have always intended to put out a list of the actual contributions with a short abstract, but I don't think we've done that. But one could see a public list right now of the program teams and the PIs that would give you a sense of at least who is contributing. Is that fair, Phil? Is there a public document that shows the summary, like with an abstract level of the contributions?
There's not yet, but it's on our list to put out. I mean, I think we could at this point put out a list of in-kind contribution titles and perhaps recipients. We wouldn't want to share details of contact details or that kind of thing, but just to give an overview of the program, I think we can now do that.
That's a good point. And of course, I don't think any of these are secret in the sense that all of the contributions have an aligned recipient. So some of these contributions are being delivered to Rubin Observatory operations. Some of them are being delivered to a science collaboration. Some of them are being delivered, I don't know. Those are the main ones. So it's certainly true already that people are talking about these contributions at the science collaboration level, or some of them. So, but it's not. I admit it's not a uniform place where someone could go and look and say, "Oh, I now understand what all these contributions are." So we will do that. We just haven't got around to it.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a related question to that. I wanted to ask about the software pool. So it's very nebulous to me how that's allocated. So I guess that's software developer time that the science collaborations could propose for. And there was a round where science collaborations proposed and the decisions were made, but I've never seen a list of what developer pool time is available when. Like when does stuff kick in? Who got time in the first round of things, and when does that start, given there have been these delays in those sort of agreements. So I was just wondering if that's something that can also be made public or you can comment on, because it seems like it kind of exists, or there was some analysis, but it wasn't clear to me who evaluated the suggestions that came in, which science collaborations got time, did any science collaborations not propose for this, and like, is there going to be another round to give the science collaborations a community time to think about? Because as far as I know, there hasn't been much action on that, but it could be that I haven't been provided information from within my science collaboration. So anything you can do to elaborate on that would be great.
Okay, so there was the first call for proposals from science collaborations and Rubin teams that needed additional software development support to come out of our so-called general pool. That happened this last winter. As far as I know, I think all teams that proposed for some software development effort, I think are going to end up with some. There was a process of trying to match up the needs of the proposals with the skills and expertise available from the pool. The pool is only getting going. There's more effort planned for it next year and the year after, and so we will do another round. I think we'll do it annually for the next few years. Some projects will be short term, some will be long term, and we'll try and keep matching it up. But as far as I know, we didn't get a large number of proposals. I think many recipient groups were already pretty well provided with software development effort from the in-kind program, but we were able to fill a few holes here and there. I think it sounds as though you'd like to hear some summary of how the whole process went, so you can see whose needs got met and so on. I think that's something that we can put together and put it out as a summary of what happened after the call and our response.
And I would just point out that you should think that it may not be that people didn't put in everything they needed. They may have thought that it was going to be highly competitive, right? And so said, oh, I'll put this in, right, because these are highest priorities. But if there is time that wasn't allocated, for example, I'm sure science collaborations would come up with stuff. But since there wasn't any feedback of how oversubscribed this time is, I think that's something that's driving some of the behavior. And so I think is some more clarity in some kind of newsletter or something post on community that could go through, because if there was extra time right now that wasn't allocated, I'm pretty sure some of the science collaborations would have ideas for small amounts of time, but I don't think some groups, I know my science collaboration didn't want to be greedy about it and only put in specific things, expecting that it was probably oversubscribed. So just something just something to think about is that it may be that you didn't get things because people aren't sure what this process looks like.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful.
There's a question from Neil online.
Yeah, this is regarding the directable in-kind contributions to the science collaborations. I certainly know that there are a number of these, and I wanted to ask, as you prepare various agreements for signatures and so on, what is officially going to be expected from the science collaborations in terms of a managerial role or supervising role for the directable contributions? I certainly think the science collaborations, at least the AGN science collaboration, wants to be helpful in this respect, and we want to try to constructively direct these things and help manage. But when we have no money to do that, that leads to a particular challenge. And so what is the thinking there? What are the science collaborations on the hook for doing?
Yeah, so we've been following this issue with the CEC for a couple of years and trying to think it through. So with the IPC team, we've tried to set things up so that the IPCs at Rubin take care of as much of the management burden as possible. We'll lay this out for the whole community at the community session on Thursday as well, but that's the goal. If we do this well, and as far as I know, it started reasonably well. We'll find out more in the annual evaluation that's just starting at the moment. If it goes well, the idea is that the tracking and the reporting and so on would be orchestrated by the IPC team. The recipients would have a necessary role in reviewing the reports just to give some lightweight feedback to the IPCs as to how the contribution is going. That's the chance the recipients get to provide.
Sorry, an acronym went by that I didn't know. IPC.
Yeah, sorry, jargon. IPC stands for In-Kind Program Coordinator.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Obviously. Sorry.
Okay, so that is the person from the other country who is leading this?
No. There's an IPC team within Rubin Operations.
Got it.
In the director's office. That team is supporting the in-kind contributions and the recipients in the way I'm describing.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so the idea is that the IPCs would do as much of the management work. The two bits left for in this case, science collaboration recipients to take care of is a small amount of review of the performance reports, and that's the chance to give feedback to us as to whether the the contributions need steering in particular directions if there's something to be fixed. And the other part is the technical direction of the contribution itself. And this is something that Rubin can't do, but is the trade that we're expecting the science collaborations to make. So the software development effort comes in, and it's a resource, but it needs some technical direction from the recipients in order for it to go in the right direction.
Yeah, it was that latter part to which I was primarily referring. I think the science collaborations want to help, but before they're made officially responsible for anything in terms of agreements and so on, that has to be sorted out still. When there's no funding to do that kind of work, things can be quite problematic, as I imagine you can appreciate.
Yeah, and in fact, with in the CEC review of the proposed contributions, there were some contributions that were not accepted on these grounds. That a science collaboration was full and didn't have capacity to do any more technical direction.
Okay. Thanks.
So maybe we didn't say it, but we have a full session on this on Thursday, I think, afternoon.
Yeah.
And we'd be more than happy to go into more details on individual contributions and other things that are of interest to you all. And you'll be able to meet these IPCs.
Okay. There's no more questions online. So.
Okay, and do the two of you have anything further to say on this front? I wonder, we are actually, by some vague miracle, sort of caught up. So I'm going to break the schedule again. I'm going to put Chuck wonder if I can ask you to say a few words about what you and I were emailing about, namely the status of the commissioning teams and the community involvement there. If you can give a brief update on that. And I know, if Keith is Keith?
Keith is behind Phil.
Okay.
He has some slides.
Yeah. Oh, and which are uploaded?
Yeah, they're ready for orange.
Okay, excellent.
So I think
You want to unmute yourself? Okay.
I'm going to pass the buck to Keith, who will provide a much better summary than I can.
Okay, can remote folks hear me? Good audio? Haven't heard.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. So I prepared just a few short slides here just to quickly, sometimes I find that words on paper are better than me speaking. So, okay. So the quick status here is that there are roughly 30 groups total. Okay. There are roughly 30 groups combining the U.S., Chile, and international, comprising something like 100, maybe a little bit more individuals that are making in-kind contributions to SITCOM. It's something like 18 out of those 30 groups are U.S., Chile. So currently we're in the process of onboarding, creating the accounts, and defining the concrete work assignments. So in early June, we sent an email with the information about the onboarding process and the next steps for the in-kind contributing groups, right? So these are groups contributing both through the U.S.-Chile Commissioning Announcement of Opportunity Program and also the International In-Kind Contribution Program, specifically where the recipient group is the Rubin commissioning team. And we've been working with Bill. Phil's been doing a lot of work with us to try to coordinate all this. So we sent the email to the designated point of contact for each of the in-kind contributing groups. And then we gave them directions. So what we told them to do is the following. We said that they should enter their information in a user spreadsheet. So this is a Google sheet that asks, for information like their name, their GitHub account, institution, email, basically so that we can create their accounts. Okay. So this is one row per, one individual per row. We also have a spreadsheet here that gives the designated Rubin contact. So this is someone who's a Rubin Observatory staff member who they could get in contact with for support and to refine their work assignments. So the accounts that we're creating for these individuals is an LDAP account. So this gives them access to Slack, Confluence, and Jira. They're also getting computing accounts at the US Data Facility at Slack because most of the general commissioning data analysis work is anticipated to happen there. And then we gave them information about how to do that. Okay, so the status. About half of the in-kind contributors have responded to the message from Richard with the invitation to set up their computing accounts. For the LDAP accounts, I think these have not been created as of last week. So this is something we need to follow up on. As far as I know, basically most of the in-kind contributing groups have had at least an initial meeting with their Rubin contacts. So they are talking. There is information flow. They are starting to develop these concrete work assignments. And there are a few specific cases where we've been working more closely with the groups. For example, there are 5 contributions from LSST France. So we've been working closely with them to get them started. They're, because they've been working so closely with us for many years, we're treating them more similar to the US Chile groups. Also, for the photometric calibration contribution, the point of contact, Sahar Alam, unfortunately passed away in March. And so we're working with this group, and Alana Urbach is the new point of contact there. Okay, so on the 7th of July, we invited the in-kind contributors to a monthly Sitcom General Assembly meeting. So we did about 45 minutes of welcome and orientation for them, basically to tell them how Sitcom is organized, what are all the tools we use, communication channels, etc. You can find a link to that material at the slides. And then this week at the PCW, we have a science verification and validation session where we're going to lay out the whole strategy for how this is going to work, at least on the science verification validation side. Hopefully that provides a clear path for engagement where they can plug in to the big system. And then there's also a dedicated onboarding for Sitcom in-kind contributors. So, I guess this got cut off. But basically, we'll do a brief introduction, and then we'll basically give a chance for the in-kind contributors to break up into different groups according to what part of commissioning they're working in, and have more detailed discussions face-to-face. It's basically a first opportunity for a lot of these groups to meet face-to-face and make those contacts. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. Can you give us some sense of sort of you've described the onboarding process and so on, but a little bit more about the content and sort of the kind of things they're going to do and how in practice that's going to mesh with the project supported effort and so on.
Yeah, so there's a range of contributions.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the majority of the contributions in Sitcom, probably something like 70 or 80%, are in the areas of science validation. So these are areas where we can look at the system level science performance requirements in the OSS and the LSR, and we know that they are extensive, but they do not cover everything that we would like to do. So for example, there isn't a requirement on galaxy photometry. There isn't a requirement on being able to detect low surface brightness objects. There isn't a requirement on PSF size, for example. There's a lot of studies that we would like to do where we would really benefit from having expertise in the community. And so I would say that the majority of the in-kind contributions are data analysis work that could happen remotely from the group's local institution where they're logging into the USDF, doing data analysis, and basically plugging into what will be basically a set of science teams that are reporting on the data quality. About maybe 20 to 30% are in groups where either they would actually be traveling to Chile, providing observation support, or for example, there's a group that's contributing to the active optic system. So there are a few groups that actually do have work that would be happening in Chile. And then there's maybe one or two groups that are doing more systems engineering related tasks. That's the rough breakdown.
There's a question from Anjay online.
Yep.
Yeah, let me just unmute. So some of these in-kind contributors, right? They promise they will do some work, and they may have funding to hire a postdoc, something like that will do this work. How does this meshes with potential delays if for example they cannot start working because the project is delayed and commissioning is delayed, but they have a postdoc at hand?
Yeah, so we've been thinking about all of these contributions as directable efforts, in the sense that the project provides direction, but that the project we're not able to formally rely on these contributions happening. We basically have to meet our construction completeness criteria, even if these projects don't get completed. In terms of how this would work for like an individual group, we are allowing the groups to make replacements in the case where there's a grad student or postdoc that is coming in to a role. So at this point we're not trying to enlarge the overall sizes of the teams, but we recognize that because of uncertainty in the schedule, that when these groups wrote their contributions, they wouldn't necessarily know the name of every individual, and that some individuals may have to rotate because of job position changes for junior members. So that is compatible with what we're doing so far.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, repeat the question.
Sorry, I actually missed what Robert said.
We're also discussing with these teams what they can do with precursor data. So the telescope chip, answers the other half.
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
Repeat the.
Yeah. So Robert is pointing out that until we actually have on-sky data from ComCam, what we're going to be doing is asking these groups to basically develop their analyses using precursor data sets. So this could be HyperSuPrimeCam, DCAM. It could be simulated LSST data sets. We basically want to have as many of the analyses implemented in code that we can run once we go on Sky. That's the goal. So a lot of work can already start now.
Can I ask a question about that? When you have lots of people develop code, you get lots of different things and different ways it's done. So is there a set strategy / template for, like, how people contribute math metrics? You're like, it has to look like this to work. Is there like a thing for, will there be a like science commissioning, software repo where it's like, your thing needs to be a function that does this? Or like, can someone be like, I wrote an IDL script and it runs? Has that been thought through of how that analysis on simulated data or precursor data is going to enable you to be able to run these, later on if those people are busy doing other things?
Yeah, I understand the question. Yeah, so there is an analysis package. It's called Analysis Tools. It was added to LSST Distrib last week. It's a refactor of Analysis DRP and FARO packages that you may have heard of before. It is a modular package where the intent is that both members of the Rubin staff can contribute both metrics and plot generation, so basically visualization, and it provides a framework where the in-kind contributors could also plug into this. So we are anticipating that the in-kind contributors could make a range of different levels of contribution depending on how comfortable they feel with coding and sort of where it's appropriate. So the sort of highest level of contribution that would be sort of our gold standard would be making a pull request to this package and basically contributing code that could then be run automatically as part of the science pipelines. And we get metrics and plots that are just produced automatically. If there are individuals who aren't quite ready to make that level of a contribution at the level of the coding standards of that have been adopted by data management, then they can also contribute in terms of suggesting science validation metrics and helping us to actually write down and define the methodology for doing those evaluations. So there's a couple ranges of contribution, and I think Leanne wants to add to this.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Keith has said, what I think also Meg was asking in her question about guidelines, about how to write code, how to contribute. As Keith has just pointed out, this analysis tools package is part of LSST Distrib. This is the Science Pipelines software, and all the software that is in LSST Distrib conforms or must conform to the DM developer guide. So the data management has a document, it's online, you can go and have a look at it now, and it has a great amount of detail about how we use GitHub repositories, how we pull requests, how we make commits, how we do code reviews, coding standards, documentation, everything you need. So if it's important, I think, Keith, to make sure people realize that if we get them to contribute directly to analysis tools, the code and the contributions must follow the guidelines of the DM developer guide.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's online. You can, I think it's just developer.lsst.io. I'll find it and I'll post it in the Slack just to be sure. You can go there and you can have a look at that now and adopt that.
Thanks. Yeah, I've definitely read the document, and it's great. So I guess the question would be: is there someone that's going to help people do that? Because like with math, the Rubin Sim team has been incredibly generous with their time to help with that, and it's a lot, but that's really been needed to get people to that point. And so, given that it's maybe slightly more programming savvy people of the community that are helping with commissioning, in some cases, there still may be struggle with that. And so I'm just wondering if is there somebody from data management who's going to have some time to help those people? 80% of the way there, but they need someone to help them get over that last bit of hurdle. And that's a lot on math. Maybe Lynn or Peter want to comment on that, but that's sort of the experience on the outside that I've seen. And so just that might be something to think about if there hasn't been someone allocated some time to be that person.
So during the onboarding session tomorrow, there's going to be a tutorial notebook that Nate Lust and I have been working on to basically give a demonstration for how analysis tools work and to basically show the capabilities. And these are things that we're still talking about in terms of exactly how to support, but it's modular enough that we could even consider having kind of a sandbox repo where people can contribute and develop ideas before it actually gets merged into a main repository. I think there will also, during the session tomorrow on science verification validation, we'll also talk about some ideas for basically how to take the wide range of science performance analyses that we need to do during commissioning and sort of divvy these up into different teams that can provide hopefully a little bit of support in their specific domain area to help people contribute.
Okay. Chuck, did you want to say something?
I was just going to comment.
Oops.
Come on.
Use yours.
There you go.
There we go. This is in part the role of the Rubin point of contact for each one of these groups, is to sort of chaperone some of this code development work, and so that help them out so that it is compliant with our standards. So it's not going to fall on any one person to be that guru that's going to get you over the hump. So you'll have to work with your point of contact, and it's just it will require real work and real effort. And we don't have the resources on the project to do any more hand-holding than what we have already signed up to. Okay, I just wanted to make one last point of correction. Keith made a comment, just for the record, just so we get the record straight. You said something about not having requirements on PSF size. We do have very stringent requirements on PSF size, just to make sure.
The modeling of the PSF size.
Oh.
Basically, there's
Oh.
one requirement that relates to the PSF modeling size.
Okay, I just make sure that no one got a misinterpretation there.
I want to respect the 12:30 end time of this because we've been going for 3.5 hours straight. I know we have some questions. I think we have an agenda item which unfortunately we're going to have to skip, which is the discussion with the Users Committee. I think the Users Committee itself will be meeting on Friday morning, and there's sort of an ongoing discussion of sort of the relationship between the Users Committee and the SAC, but that I think we haven't quite fleshed that out enough to have a concrete discussion on that. The other topic that we had wanted to talk about was sort of the PCW itself, sort of a meta conversation about as we make the transition from construction to operations, what PCW, what the form of PCW should take, and whether the SAC can be useful for discussions there. I understand that is a discussion that is sort of ongoing within the project office and others, and the SAC is very happy to contribute to that. Let me suggest that let's not try to squeeze that into a 5-minute discussion, but let's get the last few hands raised on Slack, and then we'll close it up.
Neil, do you have a question? I think your hand may still be raised from your last question.
All right, that was my last question. I'll lower it.
Okay.
That's my question.
Yeah. Yes.
So I was actually one of the people who raised that we should be talking about this, and one of the
this being
the commissioning.
Okay.
And one of the things that I would like to talk to both Bob and Keith, or maybe Bob and Chuck and Keith, offline about the Chile contribution. But what I want to know is, are there going to be any extra calls moving forward for more people involved in commissioning? And how is that going to be set up? Is it going to be set up, or is it basically locked down now that there, because there are shifting sands of the schedule, and so for instance, I was not able to say 2 years down the line, am I going to have a grad student? Am I going to have a postdoc? Am I going to have any time available to do this, given all the other things in the air? And so, is it basically past time, or is there going to be more opportunities?
Yeah.
The current outlook is we did the original call for opportunities, and we have a pretty sizable group that we're going to work with. So there are no plans in the immediate future to have another call. Although the caveat is we haven't completely ruled it out either. But at this time, I think the answer is no, we're not going to do another call. Keith?
Yeah, I would say that.
Get close to a microphone.
It's actually an enormous amount of work to support these contributions.
Uh-huh.
I firmly believe that having this expertise from the community will, enhance the science validation efforts and make LSST DR1 and beyond better than it would be otherwise. So I feel that it's very much worth it, but it does come at a cost, right? In terms of just the more nodes you have in a network for communication, it's more challenging. There's administrative and organizational costs to organize this. So we haven't ruled out the possibility of having another call, but I worry that at this point, if we were to make another call, to do it in an equitable, principled way, we would open it up to an enormous number of people who would express interest at this point, and it would just be difficult for us to continue to provide more support than what we're already doing. I'm just trying to give like a really realistic sense of how this would play out.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, well, with that, so here's what's about to happen. The open part of the SAC meeting will now come to a conclusion. We will, those people who are physically here at Dove Mountain will go get some lunch, and the SAC will reconvene in closed session. I believe we have the same Blue Jeans link. Will continue until 2 o'clock. Is that right, Ranpal? Yes. Yeah.
So this will just stay on in this room for a few more minutes?
No. What we're going to do for those SAC members who are online, we're going to break for lunch, and those people who are here will go get some lunch. We will reconvene at the top of the hour at 1 o'clock Tucson time.
Same room or different room?
Same room. I believe we have this room.